Chapter 461. Relatives. At the entrance of the grand, palace-like tent, Draco, dressed impeccably in a suit, raised an eyebrow. He glanced at Harry, whose head appeared comically enlarged by the bubblegum Ginny had given him. With a hint of sarcasm in his eyes, Draco ignored Harry and stood alongside two professors who had once taught him. "What's the matter, Remus?" Sirius asked softly, frowning as he addressed Remus, who was in a tense standoff with Narcissa. Remus pursed his lips, his expression one of helplessness. "It's Creature. He wanted to invite your guests into the tent. I noticed the commotion outside, so I came to see what was happening." "Traitorous little Creature," Sirius exclaimed without hesitation. "Where is Creature now?" "I've sent him to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for you," Remus replied. Sirius, his face already deeply tanned from more than half a month at sea, darkened further with irritation. He moved past Remus to confront Draco's mother directly. "You're not welcome in my tent. Leave." Narcissa Malfoy remained composed in the face of Sirius's harsh words, but Draco's face turned pale. He glared at Sirius, as if ready to defend his mother's honor. However, Narcissa held Draco back. Simultaneously, Mr. Weasley stopped Harry and the others, who seemed eager to intervene. He shook his head slightly at Harry, who, despite his awkward appearance, was not one to back down easily. "Let them handle it, Harry. You and the others should stay out of it," Mr. Weasley advised. "What's going on?" Hermione asked quietly, frowning as she stood behind Mr. Weasley. "That's Malfoy's mother. Does she know Sirius?" Harry blinked, observing the cold exchange between Sirius and Narcissa. It dawned on him that they might indeed be acquainted. Before he could voice his curiosity, Ron interjected with a disdainful tone. "It's not surprising, is it? Sirius's family is well known. Pureblood wizard families have intermarried for centuries. After all, Malfoy and I are related." Despite his eyes being nearly shut, Harry managed to widen them in surprise. Ron, related to Malfoy? It was a revelation he hadn't expected. "Your tent," Narcissa Malfoy began, her voice tinged with disdain. Sirius's brusque manner seemed to have irked her. She cast a disdainful glance at the tent, as if it were a piece of junk at a second-hand market. In fairness, Sirius's tent was still quite grand, holding its own among the luxurious tents surrounding it. However, it had been neglected for years, with the Black family home being Creature's primary focus. The tent had fallen into disrepair, infested with moths. "The Black family is reduced to these rags in your hands, isn't it?" Narcissa sneered. "Do you want to know what Walburga said about you when she was alive? Prodigal son fits you perfectly. No wonder she emptied the Black family vault before she died, leaving you with nothing." Sirius's face darkened at the mention of this. He cared little for the gold hidden in the goblin's underground vault. However, the mutual suspicion and animosity between him and his mother were not matters he wished to discuss publicly. "I'm not like you," Sirius retorted, suppressing his anger. His eyes turned icy. "I don't need to rely on gold or flaunt my ridiculous pedigree to survive." Harry was on the verge of applauding Sirius's retort, and even Remus managed a smile. Meanwhile, Draco's pale cheeks flushed with anger. Atticus Blaine's face flushed with anger as he reached into his pocket, swiftly drawing out his wand and pointing it at Sirius. His voice echoed with a fierce intensity, reminiscent of a wolf defending its territory. "Apologize to my mother, immediately," he demanded. "Careful," Harry shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. He, Hermione, and the others, except for Mr. Weasley, were instantly on alert as soon as Draco showed signs of aggression. The atmosphere between the two groups became charged with tension, drawing the attention of passing wizards. Some quick-thinking individuals had already dashed off, likely to inform the camp manager of the unfolding situation. To be honest, neither Sirius nor Remus took the threat from a young wizard like Draco seriously. However, as they faced Draco, who had his wand trained on them, a look of disappointment flickered in their eyes. Despite the Malfoy family's reputation, Draco had been their student for 2 years. "Put away your wands, all of you," Mr. Weasley commanded, his voice uncharacteristically stern. He cast a severe glance at his sons and daughters until Harry and the others reluctantly lowered their wands. Then, turning to Draco, he continued, "Put away your wand, Mr. Malfoy. No fights are allowed here." "Why should I listen to you?" Draco retorted defiantly, his arm remaining steady. "Sorry, young Mr. Malfoy. Mr. Weasley stepped forward, his tone firm. Perhaps you've forgotten, but I must remind you that I am an official of the Ministry of Magic. It is my duty to maintain law and order here. Are you really going to attack in front of a ministry official? Draco hadn't anticipated Mr. Weasley's response. He had never taken the Weasleys seriously, but now, with so many eyes on him, he felt a twinge of embarrassment. Put away your wand, Draco. It's not worth it to engage with these questionable people, Narcissa interjected, her voice calm and measured. She understood that continuing the argument was unwise, especially with Arthur Weasley, a seasoned ministry official involved. Coming from a pureblood family herself, she knew the potential consequences if things escalated. Gently pressing Draco's arm, she cast a lingering look at Sirius, as if to imprint his face in her memory. Then, wrapping an arm around Draco's shoulder, she raised her voice slightly. Let's go, Draco. Let's visit the Greengrass family's tent. There's no need to argue with an Azkaban criminal and a werewolf. It's beneath us. Her words caused a stir among the onlookers. Many foreign wizards, unfamiliar with the situation, regarded Remus and Sirius with fear, retreating as if they had encountered a plague. Sirius and Remus's expressions darkened, but they knew they couldn't explain themselves to those who didn't know the truth. In a way, Narcissa's words weren't entirely false. Remus was indeed a werewolf, and Sirius had spent a significant portion of his life in the infamous Azkaban. Stop, Malfoy! Harry's voice rang out, fueled by sudden anger. He raised his wand again, calling out to Draco's retreating figure. You look ridiculous, Potter. Oh, are you planning to make a scene at the World Cup? Draco taunted, clearly satisfied with the discomfort he had caused Sirius and Remus. Unconcerned by Harry's wand, he smirked and followed his mother, disappearing around the corner without a backward glance. Potter? Is that Harry Potter? Someone in the crowd murmured. It's him. Even with his face swollen, I can see his scar, another voice confirmed. Oh, he's the one who defeated you-know-who. Cam, grab my camera. I need a picture of Harry Potter. Your mother has always been curious about him. The crowd's chatter swelled like a tide under the moonlight. Initially fearful of werewolves and criminals, the foreign wizards who had retreated now approached, driven by curiosity. Come in, Harry, someone called, but Harry stood there, momentarily at a loss, as the crowd's attention shifted to him. Atticus Blaine was taken aback by how many foreigners recognized his name. Hermione, the first to regain her composure, quickly grabbed Harry's arm and pulled him closer. The tent flapped gently in the breeze. Come on, Harry, let's go inside and talk, Sirius said, taking a deep breath. End of this chapter. Chapter 462. Harry would have been astonished by the space inside Sirius's father's tent if he hadn't already experienced the expansive classroom of Professor Atticus Blaine. This classroom, once used for dealing with inferi and hinkypunks, now served as a training room for physical education. From the outside, the tent appeared to be only half the size of Hagrid's hut, but inside, it was dozens of times larger. It seemed as though the wizard who crafted the tent had transported an entire seaside villa into it. Harry's aunt and uncle had always dreamed of owning a holiday villa in Majorca. They collected numerous magazines and brochures about such properties. Harry had once lived in a similarly enviable, luxurious house, much like the white four-story Western-style building now before him. The earlier events had left them all a bit unsettled. However, the sight of the villa and the enormous swimming pool in front of it elicited gasps of amazement from the younger Weasleys. Ron broke away from the group, ran to the pool, dipped his finger in the water, and then looked at Sirius with a bewildered expression. This is a real swimming pool. Oh my God, I thought it was just an illusion. It's truly an eye-opener, Sirius, Mr. Weasley exclaimed, staring in awe at the softly glowing circle in the sky. It's much bigger than the tent I borrowed from Perkins. Harry wasn't particularly interested in who Perkins was, nor was he as impressed by the luxurious tent as he was by the revelation that Sirius was related to the Malfoy family. After holding his head in thought for a long time, Harry's neck finally gave in. He rested his hand on his cheek and frowned at Sirius. Remus, see if you can help Harry's head recover. He just ate a piece of bubble gum, and his head swelled up like this, Sirius said calmly to Remus. I know the kind of bubble gum you're talking about. Not long before you arrived, I saw a little boy whose head was more than 10 times bigger than yours, Harry, Remus said, eyeing Harry's head with interest. But the boy returned to normal after swallowing the other half of the bubble gum. I guess you must have swallowed both the funny half and the antidote in one go, right, Harry? Harry muttered under his breath, and under Remus's restorative spell, his head began to shrink back to normal. What on earth is going on, Sirius? You and Draco's mother? Remus asked as he walked into the villa to inform Creature to bring food for everyone. Mr. Weasley, noticing the father and son wanted to chat, gave Ginny a knowing look, and they all headed into the villa to explore. By the pool, Ron, Fred, and George were already shirtless, diving in to show off their swimming skills. "Ha-ha, just like Ron said earlier, Harry," Sirius chuckled dryly. There are some diehards in the magical world who refuse to abandon outdated traditions. They are pure-blood families, obsessed with the purity of their blood. They consider it a disgrace to marry a wizard of mixed heritage. But in reality, they don't have many options. To ensure their family's survival, these pure-blood wizard families intermarry with each other. So, Sirius spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness towards Harry. Harry was not unaware of what Sirius was saying. He knew that these pure-blood families often graduated from the same academy, much like how Ron's family members all attended Gryffindor, while Malfoy's ancestors were predominantly from Slytherin. Sirius rarely spoke about his parents, and Harry had assumed that the Black family, like the Weasleys, was an outlier among pure-blood wizarding families. But from what Malfoy's mother had said earlier, it seemed the real alien should be Sirius. After a brief silence, Harry furrowed his brow and asked, "Draco's mother just mentioned Walburga. Who is she?" "She's my mother," Sirius replied, his gray eyes clouded with a hint of gloom. After taking a deep breath, he nodded. "You guessed it right, Harry. She is my mother. Narcissa Malfoy is correct. She doesn't like me very much. In fact, to prevent me from inheriting the family's wealth, she made a will before she died, dividing the gold my family had accumulated over centuries between my two cousins. One of them is Narcissa Malfoy, and the other, well, I really don't want to mention her, Bellatrix Lestrange." Harry suddenly recalled that on the night of his 14th birthday dinner, Sirius and Remus had spoken to him about his dream. Sirius had suspected that the woman in his dream was his cousin, but then Narcissa Malfoy was mentioned, which meant it was Bellatrix Lestrange. "That's right, it's her," Sirius said with disgust. "She was imprisoned in Azkaban with me. Of course, she's different from me. She definitely deserves the punishment for the things she did." "What did she do?" Harry asked eagerly, realizing only today how little he knew about Sirius's life. Sirius smiled coldly. "She was a devoted servant to Voldemort. Believe me, Harry, you won't find anyone more loyal to Voldemort than Bellatrix Lestrange. Even in Azkaban, under the torment of the Dementors, I heard her screaming many times over the years, waiting for Voldemort to return and make everyone pay." But Harry was still confused and wanted to say more, but Sirius, growing impatient, waved his hand dismissively. "Don't you understand, Harry? You still don't know who my mother and my relatives are? Most of them are direct loyalists to Voldemort. Even those not directly involved secretly supported his horrific cause. My mother, well, she wasn't a Death Eater, but if she had been 20 years younger, who knows what she might have done?" Sirius's words weighed heavily on Harry's heart. Only today did he realize that the grievances Sirius suffered were not just from being misunderstood and persecuted by the world, but also from the harm inflicted by his own family. Mr. Weasley emerged from the villa, likely intending to call them for dinner, but at that moment the wind chimes outside the tent rang, and a cheerful voice accompanied the pleasant sound of the chimes. "Ah, is anyone here? I heard there was a conflict, so I came to take a look." "Oh!" Mr. Weasley exclaimed excitedly. He hurried around the swimming pool, heading towards the tent door with Sirius and Harry, eager to greet the newcomer. "The most important person at the moment, Ludo?" "Hey, Arthur, old man!" Mr. Weasley's voice caught the people outside by surprise, but Ludo, realizing who it was, barged in enthusiastically. He shook hands warmly with Mr. Weasley. "Is this your tent, Arthur? It's really nice. I bet this tent could sell for at least 6,000 gold galleons." "Who is he?" Harry asked Ron in a low voice as Ron, Fred, and George climbed out of the swimming pool. Ludo Bagman, the director of the Department of Magical Sports. He used to be a Quidditch player. Dad has a good relationship with him. He helped us get our Quidditch tickets, Ron explained. Harry nodded, recalling that Mr. Weasley had mentioned this. There was no doubt that Ludo Bagman was the most eye-catching person Harry had ever seen, wearing a striking Quidditch jersey with bold yellow and black horizontal stripes and a splash of ink. On his chest there was a large wasp emblem imprinted on the ground. It was evident that he once possessed a robust physique, but now it had begun to wane. His robes strained against his protruding belly. One could only imagine that during his days playing Quidditch for England, he must have been much leaner. Ludo received a report about a conflict here involving the use of a magic wand. He's come to investigate the situation. However, I've already clarified the misunderstanding for him, Mr. Weasley explained hastily as he led Ludo over to them. Pointing at Sirius, he said to Ludo, "Actually, this tent belongs to Sirius. I'm sure you've heard of him, Ludo." "Ah, of course, his name is legendary," Ludo exclaimed, looking at Sirius with admiration. "I was in Paris at the time and read about you in the newspapers. I must say, you truly are a hero, Sirius." End of this chapter. Chapter 463, Ludo Bagman was an extraordinary wizard. As the director of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, his position in the Ministry of Magic was significantly higher than that of Mr. Weasley. Yet, Harry found no trace of arrogance in him. "Thanks," Sirius said, slightly taken aback by Ludo's praise. He shook hands with Ludo, adding, "Actually, a lot of people think I'm a complete idiot." This was true. Ever since Sirius's story had come to light, he had become a polarizing figure in the wizarding world. Some viewed him as noble, while others saw him as reckless and foolish. Mr. Weasley, sensing Sirius's reluctance to delve into personal evaluations, smiled and introduced the others to Ludo. "These are my 3 sons. The ones who look alike are Fred and George. This is my younger son, Ron, and this is Harry Potter." Upon hearing Harry's name, Bagman looked slightly surprised, his eyes darting to the lightning-shaped scar on Harry's forehead. Harry, accustomed to such reactions, wasn't offended. He was curious about Ludo Bagman, not because of his high-ranking position, but because Ludo had once been a world-famous Quidditch player. Harry's classmate at Hogwarts, Oliver Wood, the former captain of the Gryffindor team, had dreamed of becoming a professional Quidditch player. Harry himself had considered it as one of his potential future paths. "Mr. Weasley continued, this is Ludo Bagman. You know who he is. It's thanks to him that we got such good tickets." Bagman grinned broadly and waved his hand dismissively, as if his identity was of no consequence. "Want to bet on the match, Arthur?" Ludo asked eagerly, making the pocket of his yellow and black robe jingle with the sound of gold coins. "I've convinced Roddy Pontine to bet with me that Bulgaria will score the first goal. I've given him a high price because I consider Ireland's number 3 striker the best I've seen in years. Little Agatha Timms has wagered half her Eel Farm shares on the game lasting a week." Mr. Weasley, familiar with Ludo's enthusiasm, wasn't surprised by the unexpected invitation. After a moment's hesitation, he pulled a gold coin from his pocket. "Let me think about it. I'll bet a galleon on Ireland, okay?" "A galleon?" Ludo Bagman seemed a bit disappointed, but quickly regained his enthusiasm. He pulled out a notebook and jotted down the bet. Very good, then." Ludo turned to Sirius with eager eyes. "What do you think of the competition, Sirius? Who will win, Bulgaria or Ireland?" Sirius raised an eyebrow, his favorable impression of Ludo waning. This man must have assumed from the tent that Sirius was wealthy. Just as Sirius was about to politely decline, someone tugged at his robe from behind. It was Fred and George, looking at him imploringly. "You want to get involved?" Sirius asked, amused. "No, Fred and George, your mother wouldn't approve. Besides, are you planning to ask Sirius for a loan?" Mr. Weasley frowned, glaring at his sons. "Mom burned all the inventions we made to earn pocket money. They were months of hard work," Fred said, aggrieved. Mr. Weasley's expression softened. After a brief pause, he said, "All right, whatever you want to bet on, I'll cover it for you." "Let me handle it, Arthur," Sirius interjected with a smile. He glanced at Harry and Ron. "The Quidditch World Cup is a rare opportunity. You can all participate. I'll cover 25 galleons per person." "You're paying the bill," Harry said, feeling indifferent. Fred and George immediately cheered, while Ron joined in with enthusiasm, only to glance hesitantly at Sirius. "If I don't get involved," he began, but Mr. Weasley cut him off sternly. "Ron," he shouted, and Ron fell silent. "We've put down a total of 50 galleons," Fred announced eagerly to Bagman once the excitement had settled. "The Irish will win, but Victor Krum will catch the snitch." Bagman watched their exchange with a smile, only showing surprise when the twins revealed their prediction. "You think Ireland will win, but Krum will catch the snitch? No way, boys, no way." "And a one thinks that. I can give you very good odds. How about 15 to 1? If you're right, you can take 750 gold coins from me," Bagman exclaimed. Ron held Harry's wrist, his face flushed with excitement. "What should we do, Harry? Who should we bet on?" he asked, his voice trembling. Harry, whose deceased parents had left him a comfortable amount of gold in Gringotts, was tempted by the prospect of winning hundreds more. He looked pleadingly at Sirius, who simply smiled and said, "I don't know as much about Quidditch as you do, Harry. Just follow your instincts." Bagman's voice was like a devil's temptation, urging them to make bold predictions for a big win. "You won't win much by betting on just Ireland or Bulgaria. You need to make a bold prediction to earn a lot of gold," he said, making Ron's mouth go dry. "The Irish team will definitely win. Charlie thinks so too. Their squad is the best in recent years." Ron muttered softly, "But Lynch is no match for Krum. He's the best seeker in the world, a genius. So—" Ron squinted at Fred and George, considering that their seemingly outrageous prediction might actually come true. Harry, having been stuck at the Dursleys for half the summer, knew little about the previous matches and the players, so he deferred to Ron's judgment. "If you think about it this way, the game can't last long," Ron mused, pacing around the pool. This was a rare opportunity to change his fate, and he couldn't afford to be careless. The others waited quietly for Ron to make his decision. Finally, after a few minutes, Ron returned to Bagman and took a deep breath. "Well, little guy, have you made up your mind?" Ludo Bagman asked kindly. "Come on, tell me what you think. It doesn't matter if you lose, right?" "I'm with Fred and George. I think Ireland will win, but Victor Krum will catch the snitch first," Ron declared. Fred and George nodded approvingly, but Ron wasn't finished. "And I bet the difference between Bulgaria and Ireland won't be more than 20 points, he added firmly. "Oh, that's great. Odds of 1 to 20, Ludo Bagman said happily, as if the 50 gold galleons from Ron and Harry were already his. He excitedly wrote down their names, the amount of the bet, and the predicted outcome in his notebook. After stuffing the notebook into his pocket, he glanced at Sirius with eager eyes. Sirius pulled out a handful of gold coins from his money bag and handed them to Ludo, who seemed anxious to finalize the deal. After giving them their betting slip, he hurried off, perhaps fearing they might change their minds. Watching Ron, who was clutching the Merlin commemorative coin given to him by Professor Blaine and praying, Mr. Weasley shook his head helplessly. End of this chapter. Chapter 464, Hermione and Creature. "Don't be so serious, Arthur. Let the children relax," Sirius said nonchalantly. "Let's go and have something to eat first. After getting up so early and walking such a long way, I bet you're all starving." Sirius led Mr. Weasley and Harry into the villa. They passed through the luxuriously decorated front hall and navigated several turns along the maze-like corridors before arriving at the dining room. To their surprise, the villa truly lived up to its name. In addition to the swimming pool in the front, there was a small green garden in the back. Remus had moved the dining room table to the garden, where Hermione and Ginny were enjoying a sumptuous breakfast. It was far enough from the front yard that they hadn't heard the commotion earlier. Harry hadn't realized how hungry he was until he saw the mountains of toast, fried sausages, sandwiches, pumpkin pie, and other delicious foods on the dining table. His stomach growled, and he felt as if his chest was pressed against his back with hunger. Without needing any encouragement from Sirius, the group rushed forward, found their seats, and began to feast. "What took you so long?" Hermione asked, squinting at Ron, who was holding a pie in each hand and chewing on sausages. "I bet, Hermione, if you knew what you were missing, you'd be green with envy." Ron grinned after swallowing his food, clearly delighted. Hearing this, Hermione cast a suspicious look at Harry, but he said nothing, simply lowering his head and munching on a baked potato. It's not that exaggerated, Ron, Sirius interjected, noticing Remus's curious look. He smiled and recounted the general story to Remus and the two girls. As Harry expected, Hermione frowned immediately, her expression reminiscent of Professor McGonagall discovering a student misbehaving in Transfiguration class. Ginny, however, looked at her three brothers enviously, though she was too embarrassed to ask Sirius about it. Ludo Bagman, Remus remarked, raising an eyebrow. I've heard of him. Haha, Ludo has his quirks, Mr. Weasley said cheerfully. Many in the Ministry have opinions about him, and some have even asked the Minister to remove him, but it's hard to find someone more passionate than him as the director of the Ministry of Magic's sports department, isn't it? Remus, aware of the gossip, wanted to mention that Ludo Bagman's reputation wasn't stellar and that Harry and the others' bets might be in vain. However, out of respect for Arthur, he held his tongue. By the way, Sirius asked while breaking a piece of apple pie, have you seen Creature? No. When I came to the restaurant, all the food was already on the table, Remus replied, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. You know, Sirius, a house elf wouldn't be fond of someone like me. Besides, I've stopped him from inviting the Malfoys over, so he's definitely not happy to see me. That's what I wanted to say, Sirius said, his tone turning cold. Creature! With a loud bang, Creature appeared unexpectedly in the back garden, causing the unprepared Ron to choke on his pie. Hermione quickly rolled her eyes and gave Ron a firm pat on the back, helping him dislodge the food. Once Ron was breathing normally again, Hermione turned her gaze to the little figure that had suddenly appeared next to Sirius. Her eyebrows furrowed as she took in the sight of the house elf. Hermione noticed that the house elf's eyes, as large as tennis balls, were clouded, suggesting his eyesight had deteriorated. His bat-like ears had tufts of white hair sprouting from them, further confirming her suspicions about his age. When he greeted Sirius, Hermione sensed it was not done willingly. His movements were sluggish, as if he might collapse at any moment. The poor little elf wore nothing but a dirty rag draped around his body. What caught Hermione's attention even more was the potato creature held in his hand. It was only partially peeled, completely raw, and dotted with numerous eyes. Despite the table being laden with delicious food, Sirius allowed T, his old house elf, to eat such a thing? Hermione's face turned a shade of blue, and she glared at Sirius with anger in her eyes. Creature was cleaning the kitchen, but he came immediately after hearing the young master's call, Creature said slowly, bowing his body. Master, do you have anything to tell Creature? Creature will serve the noble black family all his life. Sirius, still seething from his encounter with Narcissa, felt a mix of anger and helplessness as he watched Creature with the cold potato clutched in his hand. Ever since Atticus Blaine had taken him and Remus to retrieve Regulus from the island by the sea and held a funeral in the Forbidden Forest near Hogwarts, the house elf had seemed more polite, yet something fundamental remained unchanged. I want to ask you, Creature, Sirius said in a very cold tone. Did you invite Narcissa Malfoy to the tent as a guest on your own? I don't recall giving such an order. Creature blew his nose, his tennis ball-sized eyes filled with confusion. He remained hunched over, but tilted his head to look at Sirius. But Miss Narcissa is not an outsider. The mistress loved Miss Narcissa and Miss Bella the most during her lifetime. After a pause, Creature added in a low voice, the mistress didn't like the young master, but for Master Regulus's sake, Creature reluctantly serves the young master. Harry and Hermione had seen this very old elf once before, at Regulus's funeral. The elf had been in mourning, and there had been no communication between them. Now, it seemed the differences between individual house elves were vast. Creature and Dobby were completely different. You don't have to force yourself at all, Creature, Sirius said angrily. There was no point in talking to Creature. After some thought, Sirius gave him a direct order not to have contact with the family and then dismissed him. Wait, excuse me, is your name Creature? Just as Creature was about to teleport away, Hermione couldn't hold back any longer. She stood up from her seat, took 2 pieces of pie, hurriedly walked around the table, handed them to Creature, and offered a friendly smile. Can I trade these 2 pies for your potato, Creature? Oh, it looks delicious. Everyone looked puzzled, wondering what Hermione was trying to do. The mudblood actually talked to Creature. The mudblood wanted to please Creature. Creature seemed to see something distasteful in Hermione's frozen smile and took several steps back. At the dinner table, Harry and Ron suddenly frowned. Although they had some sympathy for this old elf who still had to serve others, all sympathy vanished after he called Hermione a mudblood. Don't use that word with Hermione. Apologize to her, Creature. Sirius was furious, glaring at Creature angrily. Oh, it's okay, Sirius. Hermione quickly intervened to prevent him from losing his temper. Look, this elf is very old. He's done heavy work all morning and only had a cold, bad potato to eat. It might be. No need to defend him, Hermione, Sirius interrupted. It knows exactly what it's talking about. Creature grumbled, unable to defy Sirius's direct command. Reluctantly, he bowed and offered a begrudging apology to Hermione, though his displeasure was evident as he muttered under his breath. Do you remember what happened the last time you used the word mudblood? Sirius asked, noticing Creature's mumbling. He rolled his eyes and added, Would you like me to remind you again? End of this chapter. Chapter 465. Creature's body suddenly froze, and his expression seemed a bit sluggish. What's the matter, Sirius? Remus asked, slightly surprised. He knew how difficult the ancestral house elf of the Black family was to deal with. Before Creature helped bring Regulus back from that terrifying place, he had never shown Remus any kindness. After that incident, Creature finally stopped cursing at him, but that was the extent of their improved relationship. It's Atticus. Sirius glanced sideways at Creature and pursed his lips. When Creature first met him, he imitated my mother's portrait and called Atticus a dirty, despicable mudblood. Ha ha, you should know that Atticus doesn't tolerate such insults. But now, Creature is very close to Atticus, isn't he? That powerful wizard, Mr. Blaine, helped Creature find Master Regulus, and the Master and his friends just took advantage, Creature muttered. Sirius merely smiled coldly. Perhaps Sirius's words reminded Creature that the gentleman he respected most was also a mudblood. Before Creature left and disappeared, he bowed to Hermione and whispered an apology only he could hear, but he did not take the pie from her hand. What did Professor Blaine do to Creature? Hermione asked, frowning. Oh, you don't want to know, Hermione, Sirius replied with a smile. But then he noticed Hermione's displeased expression and raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? You shouldn't be so rude to him, Sirius, Hermione said, dissatisfied. He's very old, and it's time for him to retire. You should let him rest. Sirius laughed. You're killing him, Hermione. Creatures like house elves don't like to rest or retire. They serve their wizarding families for life. Believe me, Hermione, if I tell Creature now that he's free, the shock might kill him. I knew a house elf before, named Dobby, Harry interjected suddenly. He used to serve the Malfoy family, but he didn't like them and tried desperately to break away. Eventually, he gained his freedom. Yes, Sirius said, slightly surprised. Perhaps there are exceptions in every race, but, Harry, that house elf named Dobby is an anomaly. If you know enough about them, you'll understand I'm not lying. But, Hermione's frown remained, her tone full of accusation. This is ridiculous, isn't it? This lavish table of food comes from Creature, yet he's eating a bad potato, unless you order him not to touch our food, or you don't pay him enough wages. Wages? At this, not only Sirius but also the Weasley family laughed. Sirius didn't point out Hermione's mistake, but simply said, After you return to Hogwarts, you can look up information about house elves in the library. Then you'll understand what Creature and his kind are about, Hermione. Bill, Charlie, and Percy slept until noon before apparating to the campsite. Ron couldn't wait to ask Charlie if his bet on Bagman was wise. After receiving Charlie's affirmation, Ron was elated, his face glowing as he imagined the wonderful life of spending hundreds of gold coins freely. As the afternoon wore on, a sense of excitement spread over the camp like a palpable cloud. At dusk, even the silent summer air seemed to tremble with anticipation. As night fell like a curtain over thousands of eagerly awaiting wizards, the last traces of disguise disappeared. The Ministry seemed to be succumbing to the inevitable, no longer fighting against people who were clearly using magic. Signs were popping up everywhere. Mr. Weasley could only sigh helplessly, already foreseeing the endless overtime that awaited him for at least half a month after the World Cup. Several adults continued chatting in the growing darkness. As the excitement outside the tent grew unbearable, Harry and his friends joined the restless crowd. Vendors appeared from the sky, apparating with trays and trolleys brimming with peculiar gadgets. Among them were illuminated, rose-scented badges, green for Ireland and red for Bulgaria, each shouting the players' names. Tall green hats adorned with clovers danced in the wind, while Bulgarian babans, emblazoned with roaring lions, fluttered proudly. National flags of both countries played their anthems when waved, and miniature firebolt models soared through the air. Collectible statues of famous team members strutted proudly in the palms of eager fans. In the bustling throng, Harry spotted many of his Hogwarts classmates. Oliver Wood, beaming with pride, informed Harry of his acceptance as a substitute for Puddlemere United. Harry also caught sight of Cho Chang from Ravenclaw, a strikingly beautiful Asian girl. She noticed Harry emerging from the Wood family's tent, waved enthusiastically, and smiled. But before Harry could respond, the crowd swallowed her up, leaving him searching in vain for her familiar figure. Distracted by a vendor pushing a cart nearby, Harry's attention shifted. "Look at these," he said, approaching the cart piled high with objects resembling binoculars, each adorned with an array of knobs and dials. "The panoramic telescope," the wizard vendor announced eagerly. "It replays scenes in slow motion and provides quick game analysis. 10 galleons each." "I wish I hadn't bought this," Ron lamented, eyeing his dancing shamrock hat and gazing longingly at the panoramic telescope. "Buy 3, Harry instructed the vendor without hesitation. Don't bother," Ron protested, blushing. "If our investment in Ludo Bagman pays off, you can repay me," Harry assured him, pressing a telescope into Ron's hands. "Fair enough," Ron grinned, his eyes alight with anticipation, imagining the gold they might win from Ludo. "Thanks, Harry." Hermione, who had been brooding over Creature, brightened and accepted Harry's gift with a smile. "I'm off to buy a race manual," she said, pointing to a nearby stall. As night fell, fireworks lit up the sky above the forest. Harry felt a growing urgency to return to the tent and fetch Sirius and Remus to see Quirk. While Hermione haggled with a vendor, Harry raised his new panoramic telescope to his eyes, scanning the jungle with interest. The lively atmosphere suddenly shifted as a chill crept over him, a sensation of being watched. Instinctively, Harry lowered the binoculars and scanned the crowd. With the keen instincts of a seeker, he quickly identified the source of his unease. Nearly 200 feet to his right stood a woman. Though distance obscured her features, her off-white dress sparked a flicker of recognition in Harry's mind. Who was she? Blinking, Harry remembered the telescope in his hand. He swiftly raised it again, focusing on the mysterious figure, but as soon as he did, as his vision blurred momentarily, Atticus Blaine noticed that no one was in the spot he had been watching. "What's the matter, Harry?" Hermione asked, returning with 3 game instructions in hand. She glanced in the direction Harry was staring. "Did you see any classmates from Hogwarts?" "I'm not sure," Harry replied, his expression a mix of confusion and seriousness. "It felt familiar, but I couldn't see her face clearly." "Never mind that, Harry," Ron interjected, tugging at Harry's sleeve with excitement. "I saw Dad and the others leaving the tent. Come on, they're probably getting ready to go in." This book is truly a masterpiece. Thank you to all the readers for your continued support and companionship. I am deeply grateful. As we enter the second half of the book, the writing is becoming increasingly challenging. I will do my utmost to maintain a coherent and engaging plot. The entire book is expected to be completed in approximately 200,000 words. I am just a few dozen monthly votes away from reaching 1,000, so please consider voting for me. End of this chapter. Chapter 466, Sparkling. The woman who had vanished from sight lingered persistently in Harry's mind. As they made their way to the arena, Harry remained silent, preoccupied with thoughts of this familiar yet elusive figure. It felt as though a thin barrier in his mind was keeping him from the truth. Mr. Weasley led them through the woods for nearly 20 minutes. Finally, they emerged on the other side, and it was only upon seeing the magnificent structure before him that Harry's thoughts of the mysterious woman were momentarily set aside. Looking up, Harry found himself in the shadow of an enormous stadium. The structure was so grandiose that even with his keen eyesight, he could only glimpse a portion of the magnificent golden wall encircling it. It seemed vast enough to house 10 cathedrals within its confines. Everyone, except Mr. Weasley, gaped in awe at the impressive edifice before them. "It can accommodate 100,000 spectators," Mr. Weasley announced, clearly pleased with their astonished expressions. He smiled broadly, adding, "Hundreds of Ministry of Magic employees have been working tirelessly for over half a year." "Amazing!" Sirius exclaimed sincerely. "This time, the British Ministry of Magic will truly make its mark on the world stage, Arthur." Sirius's praise caused Mr. Weasley's face to light up with pride. Despite not being highly regarded within the ministry, Mr. Weasley held deep affection for the institution where he had spent most of his career. He walked ahead with pride, greeting every ministry official he recognized, and led Harry and the others toward the ticket gate. "First-class tickets," the ministry wizard at the entrance noted, examining their tickets. "Top box, all the way upstairs, Arthur, to the top." Even Harry and Hermione, who were accustomed to physical exertion, found themselves breathless by the time they reached the top. The view from their vantage point was as high as a mountain. Looking down, the wizards entering the venue appeared as tiny as a migrating ant colony. At that moment, even Sirius felt a twinge of gratitude toward Ludo. Their seats were in a small box, perfectly positioned to face the golden goalpost, an ideal spot for watching the game, one that money couldn't buy. Their group was quite large, and to avoid blocking the way, Mr. Weasley motioned for the children to enter the box and take their seats. Already seated were several influential figures from the Ministry of Magic and the wizarding world. Mr. Weasley shook hands and exchanged greetings with them, introducing Percy as well. "Where's Remus?" "He was just behind me," Harry wondered aloud, trailing behind Sirius. As he was about to enter the box, he realized that Remus, who had been with them earlier, had vanished. He looked around, but couldn't spot him. Harry tugged on Sirius's sleeve, raising his voice to be heard over the arena's roaring crowd. "Oh, I forgot to mention," Sirius replied, turning to Harry with a complex expression. "Remus can't sit with us. There are too many wizards here, and the ministry is keen on ensuring everything goes smoothly." It took Harry a moment to grasp what Sirius was saying. He felt a surge of indignation, but was unsure how to defend Remus. It was then that he realized the challenges his father's friend faced in the wizarding world and understood why Remus had invested in Fred and George's venture. With a heavy heart, Harry entered the box, casting a glance at Mr. Weasley, who was busy mingling with the crowd. Atticus Blaine decided to abandon his plan to protest and glanced over at Hermione and Ron. Hermione was engaged in conversation with Ginny, while Ron, Fred, and George were fixated on the scoreboard. Realizing that his friends were preoccupied, Atticus gave up on his idea of discussing the Ministry of Magic with them. As he scanned the dimly lit box, Atticus noticed a surprisingly small figure seated in the last row. The little creature's legs were too short to reach the floor, so they dangled over the edge of the chair. It was wrapped in a loose robe with its face buried in its hands. However, the long, bat-like ears were unmistakably familiar to Atticus, resembling those of a house elf he had met before. "Dobby?" Atticus called out in disbelief. The elf lifted its face from its hands, and Atticus quickly realized his mistake. "Oh, sorry," he said apologetically. "I thought you were Dobby. He's a house elf too." "But I know Dobby, sir," the elf exclaimed, still shielding its eyes as if the light was too harsh. "My name is Winky, sir." As Winky's gaze landed on Atticus's forehead, her eyes widened in recognition. "You must be Atticus Blaine." Atticus, accustomed to such reactions, nodded calmly. "Hello, Winky. Do you know Dobby? Have you ever worked together?" "Winky serves Mr. Barty Crouch," she replied with reverence, then added, "And Dobby, if I may speak frankly, sir, freeing Dobby might not have been beneficial for him." "Why?" Atticus asked, surprised. "What happened to him?" "Freedom is all Dobby thinks about, sir," Winky said sadly. "He has unrealistic ideas, sir. He can't find work because no one will hire an elf who demands pay and holidays." Atticus instinctively glanced at Hermione, who was nearby, then turned back to Winky with a frown. "What? House elves work without pay or holidays?" "Of course not, sir," Winky replied earnestly. "All house elves belong to their masters, and we must obey their orders unconditionally, just like Winky does, Mr. Atticus Blaine." She peeked through her fingers towards the edge of the box and took a deep breath. "I'm afraid of heights, but my master sent me to the top box, so here I am, sir." Atticus recalled that Barty Crouch was Percy's boss and the senior ministry official who had ordered Sirius's imprisonment in Azkaban 14 years ago. "He knows you're afraid of heights, so why did he send you here?" Atticus asked, frowning at the thought of Crouch. "Master asked me to save a seat for him, Mr. Atticus Blaine. He's very busy," Winky explained, glancing at the empty seats beside her. Winky wishes she could return to her master's tent, but Winky does as she's told. Winky is a very good house elf. She looked fearfully at the edge of the box again and quickly covered her eyes. Atticus wanted to inquire further about Dobby's situation, but just then a new group entered the box, led by the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. Fudge's arrival was like a stone thrown into a calm pond, instantly energizing the atmosphere. The celebrities who had been conversing with Mr. Weasley rose to greet Fudge, eager to curry favor. Even Mr. Sly approached Fudge, bowing so low that his glasses slipped off his nose. Winky seemed intimidated by the presence of such a prominent wizard. She turned sideways and clung to the armrest of her seat, trying to make herself as inconspicuous as possible. Reserved for Mr. Barty Crouch, Atticus Blaine dared not look at him. "Oh, haha, Harry. I didn't expect to see you here." Politicians always have a keen eye. Fudge peered through the crowd and spotted Harry at the back of the box. He waved warmly and greeted him with enthusiasm. In this situation, it wasn't convenient for Harry to converse with Winky. He made his way from the back to the front of the box, where Fudge eagerly shook his hand. Fudge introduced Harry to a foreign wizard who had accompanied him. The wizard was dressed in an opulent black velvet robe adorned with gold trim. Harry was surprised to find that even someone as distinguished as the Bulgarian Minister of Magic was as curious about his scar as the foreign wizards he had encountered earlier that morning. The minister pointed excitedly at Harry's forehead, speaking rapidly in a language no one around could understand. "He finally understood something," Fudge said to Harry, sounding weary. "I don't speak the language. I've been gesturing blindly all night. This sort of thing should be left to Barty. Ah, I see his house elf has saved him a seat. Very considerate. Those folks from Bulgaria always want the best seats. Ah!" Though Fudge was facing Harry, he adeptly said someone approaching from behind. His demeanor shifted instantly as he greeted the newcomer with a lively tone. "Lucius, you're here!" End of this chapter. Chapter 467, The Grand Occasion. Lucius Malfoy, accompanied by his son Draco and wife Narcissa, whom Harry had met earlier that morning, appeared at the entrance of the box. Sirius's expression shifted slightly as he leaped over a row of chairs to join Harry, placing a protective hand on his shoulder and glaring coldly at the Malfoy family. "Ah, Fudge," Malfoy greeted as he approached the Minister of Magic. "Hello. I believe you haven't met my wife Narcissa and our son, Draco." Fudge smiled, acknowledging Narcissa and Draco before turning to Lucius. "You're quite late, Lucius. Was there something that delayed you?" "Oh, Minister, you have a knack for foresight," Lucius replied smoothly, though his cold gray eyes betrayed no warmth. He suddenly shifted his gaze to Sirius and Harry, his eyes filled with disdain. "It wasn't me, but Narcissa and Draco. They were startled by a werewolf at the camp early this morning. Concerned for their mental well-being, I took them to St. Mungo's for a thorough evaluation." Harry wanted to shout that Lucius Malfoy was lying, but Sirius's firm grip on his shoulder kept him from reacting. Lucius's words seemed to surprise Fudge, but he noticed the Bulgarian Minister of Magic beside him appeared intrigued by Lucius's tale. Fudge chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, ha-ha! A humorous little jest, isn't it, Lucius? Werewolves are under strict supervision, and with Atticus Blaine personally dealing with Greyback and his pack, I doubt any werewolves in the UK would dare cause trouble. Speaking of which..." Fudge glanced around, slightly disappointed. "Atticus, like you, Lucius, donated a generous sum to St. Mungo's. I had Amelia send him an invitation, but the owl delivering the tickets got lost several times. Sirius?" Fudge had long recognized Sirius, but showed little interest in him, knowing Sirius's dislike for him. However, since he mentioned Atticus, he seized the opportunity to inquire. "Do you know where Atticus is? If he's here watching the game, he should join us, assuming he doesn't have a first-class ticket." For reasons unknown, Harry noticed that Lucius Malfoy seemed uneasy when Fudge mentioned Professor Blaine. Lucius appeared tense until Sirius informed Fudge that Professor Blaine wasn't attending the game, at which point Lucius's complexion improved. Hermione and Ron were now edging closer, unable to squeeze through the crowd, craning their necks anxiously from behind. Oh my God! Fudge realized he had nearly gathered everyone in the box around him. He smiled warmly at the group. The game is about to start. Please return to your seats, everyone. As the crowd began to disperse, Harry and Sirius stood on the steps, waiting for those ahead to return to their seats. When Draco passed by, he shot Harry a disdainful glare, which Harry returned with equal distaste. Narcissa pretended not to notice her relatives, but as Lucius passed Sirius, he paused slightly, casting a seemingly casual glance at Sirius's face, his eyes deep and calculating. Your comments about the Malfoy family were noted, he remarked. Sirius frowned, but before he could respond, Lucius Malfoy had already moved to his seat. Sirius, Harry called out worriedly. It seemed Draco's father was aware of what Sirius had said that morning. Lucius Malfoy was far more powerful and cunning than his son. In the past, he had even planted Voldemort's relics in Ginny's school bag to open the Chamber of Secrets in Slytherin's name. A dream, shaking their heads as if trying to clear the fog from their minds. Harry quickly stepped back from the railing, feeling a bit embarrassed. Wow, that was intense, Ron muttered, straightening up and looking around sheepishly. I almost felt like I could fly. Hermione rolled her eyes, though there was a hint of amusement in her expression. That's the effect of the Vila, she explained. They can bewitch people with their beauty and dance. It's a good thing the music stopped when it did. Harry nodded, still feeling a bit dazed. Yeah, I don't know what came over me. The atmosphere in the Fec stadium was electric, with the crowd buzzing with excitement. The Vila had certainly made an impression, and now everyone was eagerly anticipating the start of the match. Here we go, Mr. Weasley said, his eyes twinkling with excitement. The game is about to begin. As the players took to the field, the stadium erupted once more with cheers and applause. The Quidditch World Cup was a spectacle like no other, and Harry felt a thrill of anticipation as he watched the teams prepare for the match. The game was fast-paced and exhilarating, with players zooming through the air on their broomsticks, chasing the elusive golden snitch. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were on the edge of their seats, their eyes glued to the action. Despite the earlier tension and worries about Lucius Malfoy, the excitement of the Quidditch World Cup had a way of making everything else fade into the background. For now, all that mattered was the game and the thrill of being part of such a grand event. As the match progressed, Harry couldn't help but feel grateful for the presence of Professor Dumbledore and Professor Atticus Blaine. Their watchful eyes provided a sense of security, allowing him to fully enjoy the experience without fear of any lurking threats. The game continued, each moment more thrilling than the last, and Harry found himself swept up in the magic of the Quidditch World Cup, surrounded by friends and the promise of adventure. In the dream, only a few adult wizards managed to retain their composure. After enduring the torment of the Dementors, Sirius, known for his resilience, glanced at Harry with a reassuring smile. Meanwhile, the youngest member of the Weasley family, with a thoughtful expression, pursed his lips. Young man. End of this chapter. Chapter 468. The game begins. Luckily, it's dark in here, thought Harry, his face flushed with embarrassment, yet relieved. On the other side, Mr. Weasley chuckled as he stopped Ron from tearing off his shamrock hat while simultaneously pulling his legs free from the gap between the railings. Soon after, the mascots of the Irish team made their entrance, and a shower of gold coins rained down, sending the stadium's atmosphere into a frenzy once more. Ron cheered, darting around the box to collect the few coins that had landed there. With a handful of gold coins, he hesitated only briefly before handing them to Harry. It's even, Ron exclaimed joyfully. If we win the bet, we'll split the money equally, Harry. The warm-up acts of both teams were undoubtedly a resounding success, and now, the moment everyone had been waiting for was about to begin. The boisterous crowd gradually fell silent, anticipation hanging in the air as they awaited the players' entrance. Harry held his breath, his green eyes gleaming in the dim light. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome the Bulgarian Quidditch national team, the announcer's voice boomed. I present to you Dimitrov, Ivanova, Dogrov, Levski, Vorkano, Volkov. A series of figures in red uniforms, mounted on broomsticks, shot into the arena from an entrance below, moving so swiftly they were almost a blur. Finally! Ludo's voice rang out again. Crumb! The cheers erupted, nearly lifting the stadium's roof. Ron shouted excitedly, oblivious to Hermione's disapproving gaze. Honestly, he's just a Quidditch player, Hermione remarked, exasperated. You don't understand, boys, Hermione, Sirius replied with a grin. Crumb, who had Ron in a frenzy, was dark and thin, with gray-yellow skin, a prominent aquiline nose, and thick black eyebrows. He resembled a massive eagle, making it hard to believe he was just a young man. Now, please welcome the Irish Quidditch national team, Bagman announced loudly. Here they come. Connolly, Ryan, Troy, Mallet, Moran, Quigley, and Lynch. 7 indistinct green figures soared into the arena. Harry adjusted a button on his panoramic telescope, slowing their movements to see clearly. Their broomsticks bore the firebolt insignia, and their names were embroidered in silver thread on their backs. Next to take the stage was Hassan Mustafa, the renowned president of the Quidditch Federation. He was a short, lean wizard, clad in a golden robe that matched the stadium's colors. Harry had never witnessed such a spectacular Quidditch match. As the seeker for the Gryffindor team at Hogwarts, he had faced many challenging games, but watching the Quidditch World Cup finals revealed the vast difference between the Hogwarts Academy Cup and professional play. No other game was as intense as this one. The players' speed was astonishing, and the rapid exchange of the quaffle left Bagman with barely enough time to announce the players' names. Just minutes into the game, the Irish team broke through Bulgaria's formidable defense, scoring the first 10 points. The audience erupted in cheers, and the box became a sea of joy. Ginny and Hermione leapt from their seats, jumping and waving their arms in excitement. Harry had never seen Hermione so animated during a match, and Ron's enthusiasm was equally fervent. However, once he regained his composure, Ron fixed his eager gaze on Ludo, who was narrating the game. On the edge of the field, the leprechauns brought by the Irish team the crowd erupted in celebration as fireworks soared into the sky, forming a massive, sparkling clover. Across the field, the Vila watched with somber expressions. The Irish team, living up to expectations, maintained their momentum after taking the lead. They pressed forward relentlessly, showcasing their incredible speed and seamless teamwork. Within just 10 minutes, the scoreboard displayed a commanding 30-0 in favor of the Irish. The match grew increasingly intense and fierce. The Bulgarian players, however, were undeterred. They knew their best chance lay their gifted seeker, Victor Crumb, but they bravely engaged in a point-scoring battle with the Irish. Their perseverance paid off, as Bulgaria finally got on the scoreboard. You'd better plug your ears now, little ones, Sirius shouted, noticing the Vila beginning their mesmerizing dance. Heeding the advice, Harry covered his ears and closed his eyes, choosing to focus on the game instead. Suddenly, he shouted, "Look, Crumb seems to have spotted the golden snitch." The crowd's attention shifted from the chasers to the 2 seekers, Crumb and Lynch. High above, Lynch and Crumb plummeted towards the ground, as if leaping from an airplane without parachutes. Their determination was clear: catch the snitch or crash trying. "They're going to hit the ground," Hermione exclaimed beside Harry. She was only half right. At the last moment, Victor Crumb pulled out of his dive, the wind from his maneuver flattening a patch of grass before he soared back into the sky. Lynch, however, crashed to the ground with a resounding thud, eliciting groans from the Irish supporters. "Fool," Mr. Weasley muttered. "Crumb was just faking." "The game is stopped," Mr. Bagman announced. Medics rushed onto the field to assess Lynch's condition. "He's fine, just overexerted himself," Charlie reassured Ginny, who had turned away in horror, unable to watch any longer. Hermione clutched Harry's robe tightly, holding her breath as she watched through the panoramic telescope. "Of course, this is exactly what Crumb intended," Sirius remarked, joining Harry with a touch of admiration. "The Wronski feint is a difficult maneuver. Apart from James, I've never seen anyone execute it so well in real life." Lynch eventually stood up, and the Irish supporters erupted in cheers. Mounting his firebolt, he launched back into the air. His recovery seemed to invigorate the Irish team, and as the referee's whistle blew, the chasers swiftly organized their attack, displaying skills that left Harry in awe. After another 15 minutes of intense play, the Irish team scored 10 consecutive goals, extending their lead to 103-10. Ron, finally recovering from the excitement, watched the game unfold as he had predicted. He eyed Ludo Bagman, who seemed oblivious to the fact that he was about to lose a significant sum of money. Ron pulled out Atticus Blaine's Merlin coin from his pocket and began to pray. Harry grinned, knowing that if Ron's prediction held true, he too would win a substantial amount of gold. With that, he could finally purchase the special broomstick maintenance kit he had long desired but hesitated to buy. Harry was about to shift his focus from Ron back to the game when he caught a glimpse of the scene unfolding in the box. The match was so thrilling that most spectators couldn't remain seated. They stood up, craning their necks to catch every detail of the action. The Bulgarian Minister of Magic's eyes were wide with concern over the game's outcome, and Fudge, out of courtesy, was attempting to reassure him. This was expected, but what caught Harry's attention was Lucius Malfoy, quietly leading his wife, Narcissa, and their son, Draco, out of the box while no one seemed to notice. The game was at its peak, so what could possibly be more important for the Malfoys? Harry blinked, observing the solemn expressions on Lucius and Narcissa's faces, tinged with a sense of urgency. It was as if they couldn't wait to leave. Draco, trailing behind them, appeared confused. Though he followed his parents, his eyes were filled with reluctance and uncertainty as he watched their backs. Amidst the fervor of the competition, no one else seemed to notice this peculiar departure, except for Harry, who had accidentally caught sight of it. Lucius paused briefly at the door of the box, casting a glance at Fudge to ensure he hadn't been seen leaving. His eyes then flicked to Sirius, a cold glint in the darkness. As the Malfoy family vanished from view, a chill crept into Harry's heart. Chapter 469. As the Malfoy family disappeared through the doorframe, a sense of unease crept into Harry's heart. Without hesitation, he turned to Sirius to share his discovery. The Malfoys are gone. Didn't they come to watch the game? Sirius, still engrossed in the increasingly intense competition, took a moment to process Harry's words. Once he did, he glanced over at the seats reserved for the Malfoys and noticed they were indeed empty. A frown creased his brow. What urgent matter could have pulled them away from the World Cup? I have no idea, Harry replied firmly. The unfriendly look Lucius Malfoy had given Sirius upon entering the box lingered in Harry's mind like a heavy stone, fueling his concern. Sirius, I can't shake the feeling that Malfoy and his family are plotting something. Maybe they're targeting you. I wouldn't dismiss that possibility, Harry, Sirius replied thoughtfully. Having lived through the war years, Sirius took Harry's concerns seriously. He glanced at Fudge, the Minister of Magic, along with other prominent figures in the magical world seated in the box. After a moment of contemplation, he added, I'll be cautious, Harry, but I doubt Malfoy would dare cause trouble at the World Cup, not unless he's ready to face the wrath of the entire Ministry of Magic. Harry followed Sirius's gaze and realized the logic in his judgment. We'll discuss this after the game, Harry. For now, focus on enjoying the match, Sirius advised with a reassuring smile. Neither Hermione nor Ron seemed to notice their conversation, both engrossed in the game. Ron even burst into laughter. What's happening? Harry asked, rushing to the railing with urgency. What did I miss? Ron and Hermione were too absorbed to respond, leaving Harry to figure it out on his own. For some reason, the leprechauns brought by the Irish team had risen into the air like a swarm of shiny bumblebees, forming the words, Ha! Ha! Meanwhile, the Vila on the opposite side of the arena leaped up, tossing their hair angrily, and began to dance once more. Just as Harry was about to cover his ears, Hermione tugged at his arm. Look at the referee, she giggled, pulling Harry's fingers from his ears. Harry turned his attention to the arena below. Referee Hassan Mustafa had landed in front of the dancing Vila, behaving oddly. He flexed and stretched his limbs, flaunted his muscles, and stroked his beard with excitement. Oh, that's not good. Someone should go up and slap the referee, Ludo Bagman remarked cheerfully, finding the scene amusing. From there, the game escalated into a display of unprecedented ferocity and intensity. The beaters on both sides showed no mercy, particularly Bulgaria's Volkov and Volkanov. They swung their bats wildly, indifferent to whether they hit the ball or a player. Dimitrov was nearly knocked off her broom as Moran seized the quaffle again. Foul! The crowd's excited shouts reverberated through the Quidditch field. Ireland was awarded 2 more free throws, securing an easy victory. The leprechauns stole the spotlight once more, forming a giant hand to make a rude gesture towards the villa across the field. Enraged, the villa lost control. Instead of dancing, they flew across the arena, hurling flaming objects at the leprechauns. Through his telescope, Harry saw the villa transform. Their faces elongated into pointed, beaked bird heads, and long, scale-covered wings sprouted from their shoulders. "My God!" Harry exclaimed in panic. "I've seen," for him to find the right words. "Here, Harry, you deserve a share of the winnings," Ron said, his voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. Harry took the bag, feeling the weight of the galleons inside. "Thanks, Ron," he replied, still processing the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric, a cacophony of cheers and groans echoing through the stands. Atticus Blaine, the enigmatic professor who had taken Harry to see the villa, remained a mystery in Harry's mind. He knew he had to be cautious about what he shared with Hermione and the others. The villa had been mesmerizing, their beauty almost otherworldly, but there was something unsettling about their allure. 170 points, Bulgaria! Ron's earlier shout still resonated in Harry's ears. The game had been a spectacle, with Krumm's daring maneuvers captivating the audience. Despite his injury, Krumm had pushed through, his determination evident in every move. As the match reached its climax, the tension was palpable. Krumm's decision to catch the golden snitch, despite Bulgaria trailing by 160 points, was a bold move. Hermione's confusion was understandable, but Harry knew that Krumm had made a strategic choice. "They'll never catch Ireland," he had shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the crowd. The chaos outside the box was a stark contrast to the jubilation inside. The leprechauns and Vila clashed, their tempers flaring as the Ministry of Magic officials struggled to maintain order. It was a scene of pandemonium, yet it was also a testament to the passion that Quidditch inspired. Sirius, standing nearby, seemed lost in thought. His eyes, usually so full of life, were now clouded with a hint of sadness as he watched Harry. It was as if he saw something in Harry that reminded him of the past, a connection that ran deeper than words. As the dust settled and the fans began to disperse, Harry felt a sense of camaraderie with Ron and the twins. The victory, the winnings, and the shared experience had brought them closer together. It was a day that would be remembered for years to come, a testament to the magic of Quidditch and the bonds of friendship. It was difficult to tell whether Atticus Blaine was crying or laughing at that moment. Mr. Weasley stared at the money bag in the hands of his 3 children, aware that it contained nearly 2,000 galleons, a substantial sum. "Children, if you're willing, I can stand in Gringotts and help you open a vault. It's not safe to keep such a large amount of money around, especially if your mother finds out again," he suggested. "No," Ron suddenly snapped back to reality, clutching the purse tightly. "This money is half of Harry's. I'd rather keep it in Harry's vault." "We have other plans, Dad." Fred and George chimed in, echoing Ron's sentiment. Mr. Weasley could only manage a bittersweet smile in response. "Come on, Harry," Sirius said, patting Harry's shoulder gently. Harry was still struggling to calm down, and Sirius's voice softened. "It's not something that can be done quickly, withdrawing for so many people. We managed to leave before everyone reacted." Sirius's suggestion was wise. Harry nodded, preparing to gather his friends to leave. They likely wouldn't get much sleep tonight, but just then, boom, a sudden, loud, muffled sound erupted from beneath the arena. It wasn't just one noise, but a series of movements, and Harry could feel the floor trembling beneath his feet. "What's going on? Haven't these people calmed down yet?" Charlie exclaimed, jumping off his stool with a frown. End of this chapter. Chapter 470. The commotion below was like a pile of dry firewood ignited by a spark, spreading rapidly. More and more fans joined the chaos, and the villa brought by Bulgaria were only adding fuel to the fire. The Ministry of Magic employees, tasked with maintaining order, rushed into the fray, but were quickly overwhelmed. Harry could understand the Bulgarian supporters' fury over their loss, but he couldn't fathom how the explosion had occurred. Those in the box dared not venture out, fearing they might be trampled by the enraged crowd. They rose from their seats, moved to the edge of the guardrail, and craned their necks to see what was happening below. "There are people in black robes," Harry suddenly exclaimed, peering through a telescope. "They're casting spells at the crowd." "Let me see," Sirius demanded, taking the telescope from Harry. He pressed it to his eyes, his expression growing grave. After a moment, he lowered the telescope and nodded solemnly at Mr. Weasley. "Harry's right. There are people in black cloaks all over the arena, causing chaos." The Bulgarian Minister of Magic turned to Fudge, seeking an explanation. Fudge, wiping sweat from his brow, looked flustered but forced a smile, trying to reassure those in the box. "Oh, isn't this a thrilling game stirring everyone's emotions?" he stammered, though his face was pale and his cheeks quivered. "In my opinion, it must be some extreme fan group upset about the loss. Should we send someone to investigate? Who's willing to step forward?" "Ah, Arthur, I almost forgot you were here," Fudge said, his gaze landing on Mr. Weasley. "Dad!" Ginny called out worriedly, clutching Mr. Weasley's robe, unwilling to let him leave. "I have to go, Ginny," Mr. Weasley said firmly. "If there's chaos, it's my duty to help stop it." "I'm going too, Dad," Percy declared suddenly. His chest puffed with pride as the Minister of Magic looked at him gratefully. "I bet Mr. Crouch is already directing the evacuation below. I need to assist him. We can't let him face this alone." Mr. Weasley hesitated, looking at his son's determined face, but finally nodded. "All right, Percy, you can come, but be careful and serious." Mr. Weasley turned to Sirius, who had intended to investigate himself. However, with Fudge's directive to Arthur, someone needed to stay with the underage children. Reluctantly, Sirius nodded. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of them." Mr. Weasley and Percy dashed out of the box, leaving the rest in uneasy anticipation. Fudge forced a strained smile, urging everyone to remain calm, but his words fell on deaf ears. In the dimly lit box, the air felt heavy, and silence reigned. Yet, the chaos below only grew louder, with explosions echoing like firecrackers across the Quidditch pitch, accompanied by screams and cries from all directions. Ron clutched his money bag, staring blankly at the door through which his father and Percy had just disappeared, struggling to comprehend the unfolding events. "Harry!" Hermione shouted, grabbing his sleeve. Harry turned to see her wide, panicked eyes. "Malfoy did it!" Harry gritted his teeth, glancing at Sirius, who remained vigilant. Observing the situation, Atticus Blaine remarked, "It must be Lucius Malfoy. He caused the chaos and didn't want it to affect him, so he took his family and escaped in advance." "There's no point in pursuing this now, Harry," Sirius said seriously. "We should confirm that after the riot is resolved. If the chaos spreads here, you mustn't be brave. Remember to stay behind me. This isn't Hogwarts, understand?" "What's going on, Harry?" Hermione asked eagerly. "Why do you think it's Malfoy?" Harry recounted the entire story about the Malfoy family and how he discovered they had left the show midway. Ron sprang to life, exclaiming, "It must be them! That family is full of dark wizards. I want to tell Dad your theory and let him— Oh, the Minister of Magic is here, Harry. Do you think we should—" "There's no proof, Ron," Harry interrupted. The commotion below the arena had escalated beyond fray, tending explosions and cries. The Ministry of Magic seemed to have engaged with the troublemakers, and the cold, colorful lights were blindingly bright. Hermione's slender frame trembled slightly, the sounds from below tormenting her nerves and making her heart race. Though Hermione found the Malfoy family suspicious, she blocked Ron's suggestion. "Unless you can find some evidence, Ron, I don't see how the Minister of Magic would believe the speculation of a young wizard, especially with all the wizards in the world here. I dread to think what they would say about us." Mr. Weasley had been gone for a while, and the lack of news was agonizing. The fear of the unknown was the most tormenting. Fudge, under immense psychological pressure, tried to comfort those gathered around him, but his handkerchief was already soaked with sweat. "Ludo, do you think you should go down and ask Rufus to arrange some manpower?" Fudge suggested, his voice trembling as he looked at Ludo Bagman, who was huddled by the door. This suggestion was met with approval by most. These distinguished individuals used Fudge's order to pressure Ludo into quickly summoning the director of the Aurora office and his capable men to protect them. Before Ludo could respond, a figure suddenly appeared from the aisle leading to the box, capturing everyone's attention. It was Remus. He was drenched in sweat, his pupils dilated, and his face, already pale from his time at St. Mungo's, was even paler now. He held a wand in his hand, and his new robes were singed, as if he had just been in a confrontation. "El Remus Lupin, it's you," Fudge stammered in panic, unable to catch his breath. "What's going on? Why are you here? I mean, you're not allowed to come to." Remus, ignoring Fudge's stammering, caught his breath and shouted at Sirius, who was protecting Harry and the others. "Take Harry away quickly, Sirius. There's a Death Eater." Time seemed to freeze for 10 seconds. In those 10 seconds, no one in the box made a sound. Not Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge, not his distinguished guests, not Sirius or Harry, not even Winky or the celebrities from the magical world present. Fear was building, brewing, and then it erupted. The terrified roar that erupted in the box was like a dam bursting, releasing a flood of panic. There were cries and shouts, the sound of chairs toppling, and the cries of wizards who fell from the stairs. Everyone was rushing towards the door. At this moment, Fudge's authority as Minister of Magic was rendered useless. He was shoved aside by the panicked wizards trying to escape, causing him to topple over Winky and her chair. Remus attempted to rush into the box, but he was quickly swallowed by the crowd of wizards desperate to flee, disappearing from sight. "Everyone, draw your wands and follow me out. If anyone casts a spell on you, no matter who it is, use your strongest magic to take them down." Sirius, radiating a fierce energy, had already drawn his wand. He shouted urgently, determined to lead the children to safety. But just then, boom, the wall beside the box door suddenly exploded. The force of the blast hurled many wizards backward, slamming them against the ceiling and walls of the box. As the dust settled, 3 figures emerged, cloaked in black, their bodies shrouded in an ominous, smoke-like black magic. They appeared menacingly before Sirius and Harry. End of this chapter. Chapter 471. The fear of death hung over the wizards in the box like a suffocating veil, causing most to shudder. 3 wizards, cloaked in black, stood nonchalantly before the gaping hole they had blasted in the wall, their eyes fixed on the silent big men within. Despite the overwhelming difference in numbers, the trio exuded an unsettling calm, as if they were merely facing a herd of pigs awaiting slaughter. "Humph," one of the dark wizards scoffed. Though their identities were obscured by their cloaks, the figure on the right appeared noticeably weaker. She cast a disdainful glance at Kangnai, who was struggling amidst the crowd, having been thrown by the recent blast. "The Ministry of Magic," she sneered, "is becoming more and more pathetic." "Who are you?" Sirius demanded, standing protectively in front of Harry, Hermione, Ron, and the younger Weasleys. Bill and Charlie flanked them, wands at the ready, though the cold sweat on their foreheads betrayed the pressure they felt. Sirius, now composed, his gray eyes gleaming like those of an alpha wolf defending his territory, was acutely aware that Remus had been swept away by the panicked crowd. The usually pampered gentles in the box, known for their strong magic, were paralyzed with fear, fumbling to remember where they had stashed their wands. At that moment, Sirius was the only one who could protect Harry and the others. He needed to identify the 3 black-robed figures before him. "Let me guess," Sirius ventured. "Malfoy, Dolohov, and the Caro brothers? Old acquaintances, aren't they? Why not remove your cloaks and show us your faces?" "Impossible." Fudge, the Minister of Magic, finally mustered some courage. He and the Bulgarian Minister of Magic brandished their wands, standing atop a pile of rubble, aiming at the dark wizards. Fudge's face flushed with indignation at Sirius's suggestion. "The individuals you mentioned are all imprisoned in Azkaban, Sirius. There's no way they could have escaped." "I'm not as confident as you, Mr. Minister," Sirius retorted angrily. The battle erupted without warning, a stark reminder to Harry, shielded by Sirius, that a real life-and-death duel was far more treacherous than anything they had witnessed in Lockhart's dueling class. It was more sinister, more perilous. Among the intruding dark wizards, the smallest, who seemed to be a woman, suddenly aimed her wand at the ceiling. With a blinding flash, the steel beams and roof supports gave way, sending a deluge of debris crashing down like rain. Fudge and the Bulgarian Minister of Magic were buried beneath the rubble before they could even cast a spell. "Get down!" Sirius bellowed, his arms flinging 2 scarlet curses toward the dark wizards at the door. The curses whistled through the air like arrows, but were rendered useless. The dark wizard in the center plunged his pitch-black wand into the ground, conjuring a dark curtain of water that rose swiftly from the floor. Sirius's curses were swallowed by the watery barrier, extinguished without a trace. The sight made Sirius's heart sink. "Bill, Charlie, find a way to get them out," he commanded. Without waiting for Harry's protest, Sirius charged forward like a lone wolf. A violent explosion erupted between him and the dark wizards, sending debris and rubble flying like shrapnel. Charlie, reacting swiftly, used his strong arms to hold back Harry, who was about to rush to Sirius's aid, and stared at the gaping hole in his chest, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. His mouth opened as if to scream, but no sound emerged. Instead, he crumpled to the ground, lifeless, as the remnants of his once pristine suit fluttered away like ash in the wind. Atticus Blaine, the tallest of the 3 dark wizards, watched the scene unfold with a cold, detached interest. His plan was in motion, and he seemed unfazed by the chaos around him. "Sith and I will handle Sirius," he repeated, his voice carrying a chilling authority. "Melinoff, ensure Harry Potter is under control. With him, we have leverage." Sirius, realizing the gravity of the situation, attempted to regain his composure. He knew he had to protect Harry at all costs. As he moved to intercept the dark wizards, 2 curses shot towards him with deadly precision. He barely managed to deflect them, but the effort left him vulnerable. A sinister wind whipped around him, and a dazzling halo of light erupted, momentarily blinding him. Sirius staggered, his face ashen, as he was thrown back like a bludger struck with force. He collided with a wall and crumpled to the ground, dazed and disoriented. "No, Sirius!" Harry's voice cracked with desperation as he struggled against Hermione's firm grip. "We can't just stand here." "Harry, please," Hermione pleaded, her voice trembling with urgency. "We can't fight them alone. We need a plan." Meanwhile, Melinoff, with a flick of his wand, unleashed a torrent of black smoke that swirled menacingly towards Charlie. The protective armor spell shattered with a resounding crash, leaving Charlie momentarily stunned. "Move!" Charlie bellowed, shoving Harry, Hermione, and the others aside as he dove for cover. The ground shook with a deafening roar as Bill pulled Charlie back from the brink of the guardrail, his expression grim and determined. In the chaos, Bill's mind flashed back to a night long ago in the Forbidden Forest, a night that had haunted him ever since. But now was not the time for memories. With a swift motion, he raised his wand, and the debris around them transformed into sharp blades, hurtling towards Melinoff. "Child's play," Melinoff sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. The daggers disintegrated into harmless sparks before they could reach him. Panic spread like wildfire among the onlookers. A middle-aged wizard, his suit now dust-streaked and disheveled, succumbed to fear. He bolted towards the exit, only to collide with the malevolent black smoke that coalesced into a ghastly skeleton. The skeletal figure, cloaked in darkness, let out a bone-chilling laugh as it surged forward, piercing the wizard's chest. In an instant, his body began to decay, the fabric of his suit disintegrating into dust, his skin blackening and ulcerating, until nothing remained but a gaping cavity where his heart once beat. The young wizards, including Charlie and Bill, stood frozen, witnessing the horror unfold. It was a sight they would never forget, a moment etched into their memories forever. As the middle-aged wizard's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, the room fell silent, save for the distant echoes of battle. The dark wizards had made their move, and the stakes had never been higher. Atticus Blaine stared in disbelief at the gaping hole in his chest. Shock and confusion clouded his mind as his head tilted and his body crumpled weakly to the ground. His eyes, however, remained fixed on Myranoff's direction. Nearby, Ginny couldn't contain her horror and immediately vomited. With a resounding thud, Hermione's legs gave way beneath her, and she collapsed to the dusty ground. Her face was streaked with dirt, and tears of fear clung to the corners of her eyes. The Weasley brothers, from Ron to Bill, were engulfed in despair. Suddenly the sky was filled with black gauze, which transformed into a rope, snaking toward Harry with venomous intent. Relying on instinct and his well-honed reflexes, Harry narrowly avoided the rope's grasp. As he rolled to the ground, he unleashed his most powerful spell. The disarming curse briefly illuminated the room, but it was swiftly extinguished. "A child who can defeat the Dark Lord," a voice taunted. "Oh, interesting. Let me see how much you are capable of." End of this chapter. Chapter 472, Desperation. Though the cloak obscured his face, Harry could almost discern a playful smile beneath it. Stay away from Harry. Everything that had just transpired was as swift as a lightning strike. Despite the violent impact, Sirius remained standing, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, his expression one of fury. The cursed light emanating from the tip of his wand was like a storm of lightning, forcing the two dark wizards to retreat. Yet, he remained trapped in the corner, unable to reach Harry, who stood before the box. What do we do? Think of a solution quickly. Hermione, kneeling on the ground, tears in her eyes, and her body trembling slightly, struggled to maintain her composure and analyze the situation. Charlie and Bill rushed to fend off the dark wizard attacking Harry. But even to Hermione's young eyes, it was clear that if Melinoff hadn't been intent on avoiding further casualties, Charlie and Bill might have been doomed. As for Harry, his bravery was beyond imagination, but he had no time to wield magic. He was just attacked by the elusive black rope and relied on reflexes honed in physical education classes to dodge frantically. The situation was far more perilous on Sirius's side. Unlike Melinoff, who aimed to capture Harry, the other two dark wizards cast spells with lethal intent. They seemed determined to kill Sirius. Silver flashes and roars erupted continuously as Sirius retreated, the battle spilling over into the adjacent box. What could be done? Reinforcements from the Ministry of Magic were delayed, and Melinoff held the exit, blocking any escape. They couldn't flee through the passage, and jumping from the guardrail, as Hermione had done before, would surely result in broken necks. Suddenly, Hermione stood up, pointing her wand skyward. A brilliant beam of light shot from its tip, soaring above the Quidditch field and exploding into a burst of colorful fireworks that illuminated the obscure night sky. The unexpected spectacle left the Bulgarian players bewildered, hovering or stopping midair. However, Victor Krum, ever vigilant, immediately turned his gaze to the source of the fireworks. He spotted Hermione at the edge of the box, waving her arms frantically. After a brief moment of hesitation, Krum made his decision. Riding his broomstick, he seemed to teleport, raising the broom handle slightly and appearing instantly before a box filled with celebrities from all walks of life. His eyes scanned the box, and he expressed his surprise in broken English. "You guys, what's going on?" Ron gazed at Krum, who was so close, with a dreamy expression, while Hermione, equally surprised by Krum's arrival, was about to call for help. Panic suddenly crossed her pale face as her upper body tilted back, narrowly avoiding the black rope that pierced through Bill's armor spell and aimed for her neck. A few strands of her brown hair floated in the air, visibly singed to ashes. This time, no explanation was needed. Krum understood the situation. He reached out to Hermione, his face smeared with blood, showing a determined look. "Quick, you leave, broom." However, before Hermione could respond, Melinoff's black whip lashed back toward Krum's broom. In desperation, Krum flipped his broom upside down, dodging the whip, and immediately retreated dozens of feet, staring at Melinoff in astonishment. "Go to our Ministry of Magic," he urged, his voice filled with urgency. "We need support," Hermione shouted urgently, waving her arms as she stood on the steps. "Ministry of Magic, support!" Her voice echoed through the dust-filled air, where Atticus Blaine, slightly taken aback by the sight of the disheveled girl, nodded with determination. "Wait," he said, before diving downward with a move even more dramatic than Wronski's feigned maneuver. "Are all the people taught at Hogwarts mice?" Harry thought to himself. Initially, he was desperate to shake off Melinoff and assist Sirius. However, he quickly realized that Sirius was already fending off two attackers alone. If Harry joined him, it would only add to Sirius's burden. The most strategic move was to act as bait, distracting the dark wizard Melinoff with the help of Charlie and Bill. Their goal was to hold out until reinforcements from the Ministry of Magic arrived. Melinoff's anger flared as Harry and Hermione narrowly evaded her attack. She shouted furiously, and and the long whip in her hand dissolved into a cloud of black smoke, only to reform into a large net that ensnared Harry, along with the injured Bill and Charlie. At that moment, multiple spells were cast at Melinoff, shattering her clone into pieces. Disarm you, Thunderbolt Explosion, Wingardium Leviosa. The power of the black net was well known, and seeing Harry trapped, Fred, George, Ginny, Ron, and even Fudge, who had been hiding by the wall, rushed to help, casting several spells. Melinoff was forced to defend herself, blocking most of the spells. However, a broken steel bar pierced through her magical barrier, heading straight for her chest. In a split-second decision, Melinoff dodged, but Hermione's magical object still struck her, leaving a thumb-sized hole in her shoulder. A dim green light, carrying the aura of death, shot into the black net, easily dispelling it. Melinoff looked on in shock, as Sirius, amidst his battle with two companions, had cast a killing curse to save Harry Potter. "Well done, Hermione," Bill gasped, holding his knees and giving Hermione a nod of approval. "Professor Blaine's curse, you figured it out, Hermione," Ron said, his lips dry and dripping with cold sweat. Seizing the moment, Harry and Hermione regrouped, pointing their wands at the fallen Melinoff, not daring to let their guard down. "What's going on, Sith? Cancun?" Melinoff's shoulder injury didn't seem to bother her much. She glared at Sirius and the others in another corner. "Why is he still alive?" she demanded. "It's a bit tougher than I expected," a sinister voice replied from the shadows. "Bah, this thing deserves to be called a wand," Melinoff muttered, standing up and staring coldly at the wizards before her. To everyone's surprise, she discarded her wand. Was this dark wizard surrendering? Harry and Hermione exchanged confused glances. Suddenly, a 3-foot-long cane with a gem on top appeared in Melinoff's hand. Her ordinary figure seemed to grow taller, and a suffocating aura filled the air. The black smoke, which had been floating aimlessly, became animated. Melinoff's eyes gleamed sharply as she pointed forward, and the smoke coalesced into a whip, the Whip of Thunder. Countless black lightning bolts leapt from Melinoff's position, crackling with energy. The air crackled with tension as the thunderstorm raged around the box. Where the lightning struck, it left jagged scars on the floor, and the acrid scent of burning lingered in the air. "Get out of the way!" Harry shouted, diving to the side in an attempt to take cover beneath a raised platform. However, a bolt of black lightning grazed his wrist, leaving a searing burn on his forearm. The pain was so intense that Harry's wand slipped from his grasp, spinning through the air before clattering against the wall and falling to the ground. The thunder roared, and the steel framework supporting the building groaned ominously. The surrounding walls crumbled under the force of the explosion, leaving gaping holes in the ground. It seemed as though the entire structure was on the brink of collapse. "Harry!" Sirius cried out, seeing Harry trapped beneath the platform. Nearby, Hermione and the Weasley children were also in dire straits. In the dim light of the night, Sirius's furious roar echoed. He aimed his wand at a thick steel beam supporting a nearby building. To the horror of the onlookers, the beam was sliced in half, triggering a chain reaction that caused the surrounding supports to give way. The buildings twisted and crumbled, and it seemed as if tons of debris were about to crash down on everyone. "Are you insane?" Sis and Cancun, the attackers, exclaimed, their expressions shifting to panic. They glanced at the collapsing G-ceiling, then at each other, and in the next moment, they sprinted towards the Quidditch pitch. Amidst the chaos, Sirius remained undeterred. His eyes burned with determination as he charged towards Harry, his voice a furious roar. Despite his dwindling magical reserves, he continued to hurl spells at Melinoff. Courting death," Melinoff sneered. The thunder in the sky abruptly ceased, and in the next instant, a bolt of lightning shot down like a laser, targeting Sirius's brow. Snap! It was as if the world shattered in that moment. Sirius halted, his expression frozen in shock. End of this chapter. Chapter 473. Stay safe, Miss Cleona. In a world teetering on the brink of collapse, a vibrant green barrier shattered into countless star-like fragments, gradually fading into the encroaching night. Sirius stood motionless, a chill tracing a path from his brow to the bridge of his nose. He reached up, expecting blood, but found only a bead of cold sweat. In that moment, he had brushed against death. "Who goes there?" Melinoff demanded sharply. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying with it a fresh, invigorating scent. Suddenly, flowers of emerald light bloomed in the dim air, their roots anchoring among the ruins. These ethereal blossoms quickly grew into thick arm-like vines, wrapping around the bending support beams. The world, once on the verge of collapse, began to quiet. A hum resonated as a green light materialized before Sirius. It was like a black hole, drawing countless bright green lights from the void. Amidst this radiant display, a woman emerged, clad in an off-white, Muggle-style long dress, a grapevine cane in hand. Nearby, the Weasley brothers and Hermione were frantically pulling an unconscious Harry from beneath the debris. His face was pale, but his chest still rose and fell. Hermione worked tirelessly to stop the bleeding from his arm, while Ginny sobbed on his chest. Yet all eyes turned to the mysterious woman who had appeared so unexpectedly. "Did you save me?" Sirius asked, momentarily forgetting Harry. He stared at the woman, shock etched on his face. "You are not a wizard," Melanov spat, glaring at Cleona's indistinct features. "Who do you work for, and why do you interfere?" Suddenly, a burst of fireworks erupted from below the Quidditch pitch, exploding into strange patterns high in the sky. Upon seeing them, Sis and Cancun's expressions shifted. They hovered outside the box, facing Melanov, who was still confronting Cleona. "This is the signal to retreat, Melanov. Let's go!" Sis shouted. "No!" Melanov roared. "That man's head is worth 10,000 galleons. I'm so close." "Fool," Sis retorted. "No mission is worth more than a life." The woman in the box seemed extraordinary, and Sis and Cancun were unwilling to linger. If Melanov wanted those 10,000 galleons, he could have them. Without hesitation, they soared into the sky, leaping over the stands and vanishing into the night. "You've made an irrational decision," Cleona said calmly, as if stating a simple fact. She raised her cane, ready to act, but paused, her gaze shifting beyond the guardrail. "Ginny!" Mr. Weasley's voice rang out. "Bill, Charlie, Fred, George, Ron, are you all right?" Even before he appeared, Mr. Weasley was calling out the names of his children. As he finally came into view, his clothes were disheveled, 2 bloodstains marked his cheeks, and sweat plastered his hair to his head. He leapt from Crumb's broomstick, relief washing over him as he saw his children safe. But his eyes quickly fell on Harry, lying on the floor, and his expression tensed once more. In an instant, Mr. Weasley assessed the situation, identifying the enemy in the box. He raised his wand, ready to defend his family. Atticus Blaine turned his cheek slightly towards the children gathered around Harry. "What's happening? How is Harry doing?" he inquired. "He was hit by a rock, but he should still be alive, Dad." Fred responded immediately. "What's the situation down there, Arthur? Where's Percy?" Sirius asked. "The audience is evacuating. The fireworks earlier must have been the signal for the attackers to retreat. Our people are pursuing Percy and following Barty to guide the audience away," Arthur replied. "All right," Sirius nodded sternly, pointing his wand at Melanov. "The situation has changed. Now it's 2 or 3 against 1. You have 2 choices. Put down your wand and surrender, or continue to resist and meet your end here. Make your choice." "I'm sorry," Melanov replied coldly. "I don't want to choose either. Whoever captures this dark wizard, I will recommend them to the International Federation of Wizards for the Ord of Merlin, First Class." Fudge suddenly declared, lifting the wooden board that had pinned him down. He was panting and holding his forehead, as if just waking from a coma. Melanov ignored Sirius and didn't even glance at Mr. Weasley, who was rushing over. Her cold eyes were fixed on Vitia Cleona, who seemed detached from the chaos around her. "I ask again, who are you, and why are you here?" To be honest, not only was Melanov curious, but everyone in the box was intrigued. Who was this seemingly powerful young lady? Which country did she hail from? She had saved Sirius, yet she remained unwilling to reveal her true identity. The young lady, now the center of attention, remained silent. Instead, she walked slowly towards Harry with light, deliberate steps. "What do you want to do?" Hermione asked nervously, spreading her arms protectively. Despite the fact that this mysterious woman had saved them, Hermione couldn't fully trust someone of unknown origin. "The injury on his arm needs immediate attention, or it will become very troublesome," Cleona said calmly. Prompted by her words, Ron and the others turned to look at Harry. They gasped in shock. What had been a simple burn mark on Harry's arm had spread, turning into a gruesome wound that oozed blood and had turned black, reminiscent of the middle-aged wizard who had clashed with Melinoff earlier. Everyone's faces turned pale. "Please, help him," Hermione pleaded, stepping aside in desperation. Vitiacleona gently moved her cane, and Harry's limp body floated gracefully from the ground towards her. Her jade fingertips glowed with an emerald light, and the vitality flowed through the scars, effortlessly erasing the wounds filled with dark magic. In an instant, Harry's arm was smooth again, and his pallor faded as his complexion visibly improved. When he landed, his hazy green eyes fluttered open. "Oh, Harry!" Hermione cried, covering her mouth in relief, while Ron anxiously inquired about Harry's condition. "What's going on?" Harry asked, blinking in confusion at the concerned faces around him. "This young lady saved you, Harry," Mr. Weasley interjected, still holding his wand at the ready. "Oh, thanks," Harry mumbled, still dizzy and unaware of the mysterious woman beside him. After Mr. Weasley's reminder, he turned his gaze towards her. At first glance, his brows furrowed, and he stood up, blinking hard, confusion evident in his eyes. "You're welcome, Mr. Harry Potter." Vitiacleona nodded slightly, her demeanor as composed as ever. The calm tone in her voice now carried a hint of urgency. "Well, now that you've regained your health, might I ask if you'd be willing to accompany me somewhere?" Harry blinked rapidly, a sign that his clarity was returning. What did she mean? Where was this enigmatic woman planning to take him? Everyone was bewildered by her unexpected request, their eyes fixed on the mysterious and powerful lady, trying to decipher her intentions. "Ah, I see," Melinoff suddenly chuckled. "Your target is Harry Potter, isn't it? Our objectives don't clash, do they? We could join forces." A sudden realization struck Harry, causing panic to wash over him. "It's you. I remember you. You're the woman from my dream." Dream? What could that possibly mean? Cleona furrowed her brow, puzzled by Harry's words, but Sirius understood immediately. "Get away from her, Harry," Sirius shouted, his voice the loudest it had been all night. Time seemed to freeze. Sirius, Mr. Weasley, Bill, and Charlie all reached out towards Harry, who was desperately trying to back away. Yet, what should have been swift movements felt agonizingly slow. Vitiacleona effortlessly seized Harry's arm. The grapevine wand she held aloft began to emit a faint glow, signaling her imminent departure. But just then, something flickered beneath the clear night sky. A blinding flash of lightning shattered the stillness, and the air quivered under its force. A palpable gravitational pull descended, anchoring everyone, including Vitiacleona, firmly in place. The next sound that echoed across the Quidditch pitch sent a wave of panic through Vitiacleona's green eyes. "You're well, Miss Cleona." End of this chapter. Chapter 474, Level Duel. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if an immense pressure from the real world had descended upon the Quidditch pitch. Spectators who hadn't yet evacuated wore expressions of shock and awe. It felt as though a prehistoric dragon had emerged from the clouds, its mighty roar echoing across the earth, intimidating the weaker creatures below. "Atticus!" The thunderous, majestic voice boomed from the sky, and Sirius felt his taut nerves suddenly relax. An indescribable sense of relief washed over him. Alone, he had faced several powerful wizards of unknown origin, with the safety of all the children resting on his shoulders. The pressure had been unimaginable. Harry and Ron's faces lit up with joy, while Hermione and Ginny covered their mouths, tears of happiness streaming down their cheeks. A sharp sound pierced the air, reminiscent of a Muggle jet at full throttle. Though the familiar figure had yet to appear, the piercing whistle was already felt by the two wizards standing opposite the crowd, like the weight of a mountain pressing down on them. "Atticus Blaine!" Melinoff's voice was strained, as if forced from her throat. In that moment, she hesitated no longer. Seizing the opportunity as Sirius and Mr. Weasley stood momentarily stunned, she turned and dashed towards the gaping hole in the box's wall. But after only 2 steps, a golden spark appeared in the endless darkness outside the opening, shooting through the air with incredible speed. Clang! A spear, its tip ablaze, embedded itself in the ground before Melinoff. Had she not moved swiftly, it would have pierced her chest. Yet, before the relief in her eyes could fade, the spear began to tremble. In an instant, it lost its solid form, unraveling into multiple golden lines of fire. Before Melinoff could react, a golden cocoon of flames enveloped her. Why was Atticus Blaine here? Vicia had been monitoring Harry all day, ensuring that Atticus was not with Sirius and his group. She had not anticipated this sudden chaos, otherwise she would never have acted. Now, there was no time to ponder why Blaine had appeared. The priority was to escape. Casting a glance at Harry, who was within arm's reach, Vicia's emerald eyes flickered with regret. In the next moment, her form blurred, trailing green flames like a meteor as she shot from the top of the Quidditch pitch into the boiling night. Boom! The roar echoed through the night sky, like a heavy stone cast into a lake. A tangible wave of air swept outwards, plowing through the green meteors in its path. Vicia reappeared high in the sky, her real body plummeting half a mile before she managed to halt her descent, finally hovering at the same height as the Irish team's ring. As she stood upright, a young man with a solemn expression was already positioned on the opposite side of the court, standing atop the ball ring, smiling at her. "Long time no see, Mr. Blaine," Vitia Cleona said, her skirt fluttering as her beautiful face took on a somber hue. She abandoned any hope of luck, nodding to Atticus with a slight sigh. Atticus's gaze swept over the stadium below, where tens of thousands of spectators had paused in their evacuation, staring up at the sky in astonishment, whispering to one another. "Atticus!" Sirius shouted from the guardrail of the box, addressing the young wizard standing on the ball ring. The heavy pressure he released covered a vast area. "This woman, she wants to kidnap Harry." Atticus did not turn around but nodded slightly, as if unsurprised by the revelation. Yet, in truth, he was indeed taken aback by the woman's presence. Vicia Cleona stood there, her presence commanding attention. Ever since Foley discovered that Lucius was orchestrating an elaborate prank that night, he wasted no time. He apparated to a familiar nearby location and flew directly to the camp, breaking into Atticus Blaine's perception. The magical disturbance was so intense that Atticus initially thought he was hallucinating. "Long time no see, Miss Cleona," Atticus greeted with a slight no, de, and a gentlemanly smile. "After our abrupt farewell last time, I've been eager to see you again. I couldn't find you, but meeting you here is a delightful surprise, isn't it?" "What's going on?" Ron exclaimed, his eyes wide with confusion. "This woman, is she a friend of Professor Blaine?" "Use your brain, Ron," Hermione retorted sharply. "I know as much as you do, Mr. Blaine." Realizing there was no point in regretting her actions that night, Vitia regained her composure. She fixed her gaze on Atticus, her voice steady. "I can't answer any of your questions." "I'm afraid that answer doesn't satisfy me, Miss Cleona," Atticus replied, his expression turning cold. With a subtle flick of his wrist, the cool evening air of mid to late August transformed into an oppressive heat, as if a massive furnace had appeared above the Quidditch pitch, baking everything around it. Atticus glanced at the wizards who were watching the spectacle. "I am currently working at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Would I be honored to invite you to Hogwarts? No one in the world can face both you and Mr. Albus Dumbledore simultaneously," Vicia replied, her long emerald hair billowing in the scorching wind. The druid priestess's lips, slightly younger than Atticus's, curled into a bitter smile. "I understand your anger and your desire to resolve the confusion in your heart, Mr. Blaine, but I truly can't provide you with an answer. I apologize for what happened before, but if you insist on detaining me, then I must apologize once more." Atticus hadn't expected Vicia Cleona to surrender without resistance. His primary concern was the safety of the wizards who hadn't evacuated the Quidditch pitch. However, Vicia was more decisive than he had anticipated. Realizing she couldn't leave smoothly, her eyes hardened with resolve. She leaped from the ring, and amidst the gasps of countless wizards watching the confrontation, she plummeted to the ground. Simultaneously, she hurled her grapevine wand to the earth. Boom, boom, boom. Thunder erupted in the cloudless night, and blinding bolts of lightning pierced the dark sky, striking the Quidditch pitch. As the grapevine wand sank into the ground, the green lawn surged upward, transforming the stadium into a rippling jungle in an instant. Rumbling echoed as the ground shook violently, causing the Quidditch pitch to tremble to its very foundations. Broken stone slabs, seats, and ceilings rained down, prompting the wizards below to scream and scatter in panic. Sirius clung to the guardrail, his eyes nearly bulging from their sockets in shock. In the now unrecognizable lawn below, a massive green vine erupted from the earth, swelling in the wind. This vine was more than 10 times thicker than the homping willow beside the Hogwarts playground. As the vine grew to a certain height, the main stem quickly divided from 1 to 2, then 2 to 4. In the blink of an eye, the thick, swinging vines had overtaken the magnificent Quidditch pitch. "I must be dreaming," Mr. Weasley murmured absently, stunned by the spectacle. Every one of the young wizards in the box, including Crumb, the genius seeker who had never had a chance to speak with Hermione, seemed to be under a petrification spell. They stared outside the box, witnessing the chaos unfold. The howling winds carried an ominous chill, and a massive vine loomed, exerting an overwhelming psychological pressure that left everyone paralyzed with fear. Cries echoed from the depths of the stadium as spectators, caught in the frenzy, scrambled to escape through the narrow passageways. The air was filled with the sounds of people being trampled, the cries of those searching for lost loved ones, and the shouts of anger and desperation. "We can't stay here any longer." Sirius, having witnessed Atticus Blaine's powerful display, was the first to regain his composure. He urgently called out to the remaining wizards in the box who were still conscious. "Hurry downstairs. Staying here is a dead end." "But what about this one?" Mr. Weasley shouted, Ollie pushing the children out of the box. Just before leaving, he caught sight of Melanoff, trapped within a cage of fire. Judging by his attire, Melanoff was likely an accomplice of the attackers. Perhaps he held valuable information. Sirius, despite being injured in the previous battle, his body covered in scars and his robe stained with blood, looked at Melanoff with disdain. Yet he relented, waving his wand to separate the floor beneath Melanoff, carrying him out of the box. Each time the swaying vines moved, the fierce wind they generated was strong enough to dislodge boulders from the ground. Yet, Atticus Blaine stood unwavering in the arena, his hair the only thing moving in the gale. Vitia Cleona, positioned at the fork of the vine, refrained from attacking, while Atticus, with a solemn expression, exercised great restraint. They were both waiting. Finally, as the last group of people from the top box descended to the first floor and joined the crowd rushing through the passage, Atticus made his move. He twisted his neck, producing a sharp clicking sound. "Interesting," he murmured, a calm expression on his face as he allowed a faint smile to play on his lips, tinged with a hint of blood. "Is this the birth of the tree world?" His soft chant was lost in the roaring wind, and in the next moment, under the dark night sky, a blazing sun began to rise. End of this chapter. Chapter 475, T0 Level Duel. The wizards who had fled the Quidditch Stadium in panic were astounded to see the night sky torn apart by an intensely bright light, illuminating the surroundings as if it were midday. Turning back in disbelief, they witnessed a blazing sun rising above the dilapidated stadium, exuding an overwhelming pressure. Boom, boom, boom. The air was thick with tension, and both combatants were silent, knowing there was no turning back from the path they had chosen. Determination shone in Cleona's green eyes as she felt an emotional connection with the vines that crowded the Quidditch field, each one an extension of her will. Suddenly, these massive vines moved in unison, straightening and surging forward with the force of a world-ending storm, aiming to strike Atticus Blaine, who hovered in the sky. In that moment, Atticus resembled the mythical Suzaku from Eastern legends, surrounded by fierce flames that had condensed into a tangible fire slurry. As the vines rolled in from all directions, his eyes blazed with intensity. The oppressive heat surrounding him exploded outward, incinerating the vines as they entered the sun domain. They withered instantly, reduced to light smoke without leaving a trace. Yet, the druid's ancient magic was resilient. Vines continued to sprout from the earth, seemingly endless in their assault. The fierce clash between the sun field and the vines unleashed thunderous winds and powerful gales. The miracle building that the Ministry of Magic had painstakingly constructed over half a year was battered by the elements, collapsing piece by piece under the onslaught. The violent magical impact caused the very air in the arena to tremble as if shrouded in a hazy veil. In the blurred vision of onlookers, the only clear sight was the sun suspended high above and the godlike figure within it. The fleeing crowd halted, captivated by the spectacle. In the jungle, the faint flashes of camera lights flickered continuously. Sirius and Mr. Weasley led the children away from the field, climbing to higher ground until the oppressive pressure behind them eased enough for them to catch their breath. The ground cracked, and a stray bolt of lightning from the arena struck the wizard's campsite. In an instant, the camp erupted like a massive gas explosion, obliterating everything within 100 feet of the impact. Bill clung to a pine tree, his handsome face frozen in disbelief, mouth agape, forgetting to breathe in his shock. Only when his face turned red did he gasp for air, turning stiffly to his brother Charlie. "Was that Atticus Blaine?" Bill asked, his voice tinged with incredulity. "I don't quite understand either," Charlie replied, shaking his head with equal disbelief. "Oh, this is not a big scene, gulu gulu." Their humorous exchange left everyone silent, until an old but energetic voice broke the quiet, drawing Harry and the others' attention. They turned to see an elderly man, his face lined with age spots and dark brown marks. Despite his appearance, he seemed unfazed by the chaos, his focus solely on the Quidditch field. The duel unfolding inside left everyone in shock, except for the old man, who seemed unfazed. He even appeared ready to take a swig of rum. Observing the astonishment in the eyes of those around him, the old man grinned and exhaled a breath that carried a fishy scent. If you had witnessed the legendary duel between Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald in Paris half a century ago, you wouldn't be so surprised by what's happening now. Though I must admit, this is quite a spectacle. Hermione frowned, puzzled by the old man's contradictory statements. He had just dismissed the duel between Professor Atticus Blaine and the mysterious woman as insignificant, yet he quickly changed his tune. "Ah, Ephius, I didn't expect to see you here," Sirius exclaimed in disbelief, blinking at the sight of the old wizard. "Sirius," Ephius replied with a smile, "I've already heard that you've been proven innocent." Ephius Doge, Sirius explained to Roy, who was unfamiliar with the old wizard. "He's a good friend of Dumbledore's." Then, with curiosity, he asked, "Why are you here, Ephius?" "Oh, I came to watch the World Cup, of course." Ephius took another sip of his drink. "Then there was that dreadful terrorist attack. Speaking of which, I heard the young man involved was Atticus Blaine. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, so I couldn't see clearly. You worked with him. Is it really him?" "Yes, that's him, the director of the security office at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Atticus Blaine," Sirius confirmed. "Ah, it seems Albus has found a worthy successor," Ephius remarked happily. Every second that the sun domain was maintained, magic flowed like water from a breached dam. Even Atticus, after 2 minutes, struggled to hold on. Yet his gaze pierced through the brilliant light to focus on Vidia Cleona, whose emerald-green hair whipped wildly around her. Her eyes remained resolute, unwavering. It seemed unscientific to Atticus. How could a young wizard in her early 20s possess such formidable power? Confusion flickered in his eyes, though he forgot that he too was an anomaly. A war of attrition was not what Atticus desired, as other dangers might lurk in the shadows. His sharp eyes grew fiercer. In the next moment, the sun ring encircling him trembled slightly and began to descend. The sun's radiance was a catastrophe for living beings. Vitia's expression shifted dramatically. In her vision, as Atticus Blaine descended to the earth with the sun enveloping him, it seemed as if the world itself was fracturing. The invisible magical confrontation intensified several-fold. The vines that had previously withstood the scorching heat now melted like snow under the sun's touch. Everything in her sight was tinged with red, and Vitia's fair face flushed from the heat. Her eyes flicked over her flying hair, now singed by the intense heat. Under the searing solar wind, the steel-based Quidditch field erupted with explosive sounds, and the earth was not spared. The kelp-like green grass was incinerated, revealing layers of charred yellow soil, which melted and peeled away under the relentless magical heat. End of this chapter. Chapter 476, T0 Level Duel. Atticus Blaine descended to the earth, enveloped by the sun ring. Though his descent was slow, it carried an unstoppable momentum. The massive vines rooted in the ground could not withstand the scorching heat, akin to burning mountains and boiling seas. They began to crack from their tops downward, while the earth peeled away layer by layer. The core strength of the vines, buried underground, was exposed once more. The ancient grapevine wand, passed down through generations, emerged into the air. Atticus's focused gaze fell upon the cane, which exuded a strange power and was smooth and green. His brows furrowed slightly. He had seen this cane when he first met Vidya Cleona. At that time, he had thought it extraordinary, and now it seemed his judgment was correct. The barrier surrounding Vidya's body could no longer resist the pervasive heat. Sweat rolled down her face as she gritted her teeth. Under the exertion of Atticus Blaine, she finally felt fatigue setting in. The sun ring, shining brightly in the night, had approached a dangerously close distance. If it wasn't stopped, Vidya was certain she would be reduced to wisps of smoke, just like the vines under the surging heat. Staring at the stern-eyed young figure within the sun ring, Vidya's eyes flashed with a trace of regret. It wasn't just for tonight's rash actions, but also for the previous trip to the island of Avalon. If only she had sought Atticus Blaine's help in a more appropriate manner, without angering the powerful wizard. At this thought, Vidya's eyes shifted slightly. Atticus Blaine also had a secret she could exploit. He was the powerful bounty wizard known in the underground world as the Golden Viper. Even if some in the magical world were aware of this, there certainly weren't many, and Atticus definitely didn't want his dark identity exposed. If the deeds he committed as the Golden Viper became known to the wizarding world, Atticus Blaine's reputation could be ruined instantly. Yet she hesitated to use this knowledge to blackmail Atticus into letting her leave. She would not make this choice unless the situation was desperate, as it would mean completely turning Atticus Blaine against her. Not only her, but the Druid cult might also face Blaine's wrath. Moreover, in the eyes of the wizarding world, Atticus Blaine was considered the greatest wizard of their time, the successor trained by Albus Dumbledore. If it were revealed that Blaine was the Golden Viper, what would Dumbledore's reaction be? Would it be one of justice or anger? If it were the former, she might find some respite, but if it were the latter, it would undoubtedly spell disaster for her and the sect. Although kidnapping Harry Potter had already offended these two powerful wizards, as long as Harry Potter was alive, there was always room for negotiation. With her mind racing, Vidya reached deep into the earth. Her hidden palm returned to her with a hiss, feeling the warmth of the wand in her grasp. In a moment of trance, Vidya seemed to see her teacher, the kind and gentle old man, smiling encouragingly at her. Suddenly, the remaining vines below dissipated in an instant, catching Atticus slightly off guard. What? Atticus, who had already gained the upper hand, narrowed his eyes, alertness flashing within them. Have you decided to give up, Miss Cleona? Many times, giving up requires more courage than perseverance, Vidya replied, her expression tinged with sadness. Unfortunately, Mr. Blaine, I don't have that courage. Atticus frowned. Before he could respond, the priestess below suddenly stretched out her bare hand into the air. Under the blazing light, a seed that still exuded pure and a bright emerald light shimmered in the air as Vidya raised her cane, tapping it gently on the seeds. A strange hum resonated, sending ripples through the atmosphere. The seeds, shaped like teardrops, quickly transformed and grew amidst a radiant bloom. In the blink of an eye, a towering oak guardian stood proudly on the Quidditch field. The violent surge of magic caused the sky and earth to shift dramatically. Thick clouds gathered, rolling ominously across the sky, while countless dazzling bolts of lightning danced among them. An indescribable pressure weighed heavily on the hearts of everyone outside the arena. Vidya Cleona knelt on one knee atop the ancient, titan-like oak guardian, panting slightly. Merlin's beard! Oh my God, am I hallucinating? The wizards in the forest surrounding the stadium exclaimed in disbelief. Many rubbed their eyes or pinched themselves to ensure they weren't dreaming. Where did this woman come from, and why did she kidnap you, Harry? Mr. Weasley nearly collapsed under the strain. If the Ministry of Magic's opponents had only been the wizards in black cloaks causing the earlier commotion, Mr. Weasley might have felt confident in handling them. But this mysterious witch who appeared later left him with no choice but to hope the Ministry could capture her. A group of young wizards questioned their reality, and Harry was no exception. After hearing Mr. Weasley's question, Harry opened his mouth to respond, but Sirius's warning glance silenced him. Strangers were everywhere, and if anyone discovered that this powerful, mysterious witch had ties to Voldemort, the ensuing panic would be catastrophic. The godlike Oak Guardian was enveloped in a green glow, which seemed unusually resistant to the scorching heat. The damage from Atticus Blaine's Sun Realm was significantly reduced. Yet Atticus remained unfazed, rising slowly to meet Vitia Cleona's gaze, his eyes filled with admiration. Aside from Albus Dumbledore, who was nearing the end of his days, this druid priestess was the first wizard to confront him so freely. "I must admit," Atticus nodded slightly, "you have earned my respect, Miss Cleona. I am willing to call you the most formidable opponent of my life, but it is a pity." With the support of her cane, Vitia's magic remained potent, but she could no longer withstand the mental strain imposed by the powerful magic of the royal envoy. She lacked the energy to heed Atticus's lament, struggling to breathe. "Let me go, Blaine!" "I'm sorry," Atticus replied calmly, shaking his head. "I'm afraid I can't grant your request, Miss Cleona." Boom! The Oak Guardian suddenly moved, its fist as large as a mountain crashing forward. The sheer force of the wind pressure obliterated half of the crumbling Quidditch field. "You've wasted your efforts," Atticus remarked, effortlessly dodging the punch. Indeed, the giant wooden figure created by Vitia's magic possessed unparalleled destructive power, but with her strength waning, she could no longer control it effectively, merely expending her energy. As Atticus anticipated, after commanding the Oak Guardian to strike, Vitia was left with no strength. Blood stained her lips, and her body slumped helplessly atop the Guardian's head, her expression one of sorrow. Atticus dispelled the fierce fire surrounding him, standing in the void as he pointed his wand at the now sculpted Oak Guardian. "Shen Feng Wu Ying," he intoned. The tip of his ebony wand emitted half-moons of cold light. The uncontrolled Oak Guardian was defenseless, and in an instant it was reduced to sawdust, scattered across the sky. Vitia's weakened body fell. Atticus Blaine sighed deeply, then raised his wand. Vitia, who had been plummeting, halted in midair and slowly drifted toward him. Just as everything seemed poised to crash to the ground, a thick smoke enveloped the field. Above the Quidditch pitch, a void appeared, darker than the deepest abyss, resembling drops of ink spreading through a clear pool. This darkness, filled with malevolence and violence, expanded rapidly. Accompanying it was a sharp, harsh voice tinged with anger. "I remember telling you that it would be unwise to take action at the World Cup." End of this chapter. Chapter 477. As the towering wooden figure, as grand as mountains and rivers, was reduced to splinters by Atticus Blaine, the mysterious and formidable witch fell to the earth. Wizards hidden in the distant forest, including Sirius, Harry, and others, collectively exhaled in relief. They had immense faith in Atticus, yet the witch's oppressive aura had been so overwhelming that even Sirius, who had witnessed Atticus's unrestrained power, had been on edge. "It's over," Sirius murmured, wiping the sweat from his brow. As the bright sun faded, the forest's scorching air quickly cooled, and a gentle breeze began to blow. Sirius suddenly felt a chill down his spine and realized his clothes were drenched. Beside him, Mr. Weasley and the young wizards appeared equally sweaty and disheveled. The Quidditch World Cup final, meant to be a grand celebration for the wizarding world, had taken an unexpected turn. Now, as the dust settled, everyone looked dejected. The earth-shattering showdown had severely shaken their worldviews. Harry, his lips parched from dehydration, was about to speak when a piercing scream escaped his throat. "Ah!" he cried, collapsing to his knees and clutching his forehead. It felt as if a red-hot wire was searing his scar, and the pain in his soul made him wish for immediate relief. "What's happening to Harry Potter?" Ephius Dorje, nearby, was the first to react, asking with concern. Sirius, snapping out of his shock, immediately rushed to Harry's side. He lifted Harry from the ground, cradling him in his arms. Hermione, Ron, and the rest of the Weasley family gathered around, their faces etched with panic as they watched Harry writhe in agony. "Scar," Harry managed to gasp, the word forced from his throat. "Your scar hurts again, Harry?" Ron asked, bewildered. He gripped Harry's wrist tightly, looking helplessly at Hermione. But what could Hermione say at that moment? What answer could she provide? "Find Atticus, Sirius. Maybe he can help Harry," Mr. Weasley urged, seeing Sirius overwhelmed with worry. Without hesitation, Sirius picked up Harry and prepared to rush towards the ruins. However, the sudden darkening of the space above the arena made him pause. "I warned you, it would be unwise to act during the World Cup." A chilling voice emanated from the swirling mass of blackness that tainted the void. The black wave surged back, striking Vidia Cleona, who was advancing towards Atticus. Atticus's expression was grim, yet his eyes betrayed little surprise. He had anticipated this moment ever since he sensed the priestess's magical presence at the Quidditch field that night. Atticus was aware that the druid priestess had allied with the most infamous dark wizard in British wizarding history. Cleona's attempt to abduct Harry was undoubtedly linked to Voldemort, and he speculated that Voldemort orchestrated this plan, possibly with Lucius Malfoy hiring underworld wizards to assist. However, Voldemort's recent words made Atticus realize his assumption was incorrect. Although Cleona had taken a significant risk by attacking Harry during the World Cup, it seemed this act was not under Voldemort's orders but her own decision. As his thoughts raced, Atticus sighed deeply. Since Atticus Blaine entered the wizarding world, he had always anticipated a confrontation with the Dark Lord, the one who had wreaked havoc on the British wizarding community and left countless families in mourning. However, he never imagined their encounter would occur under such hasty circumstances. A few strange lights flickered in Atticus's brown eyes. Although he had finally come face to face with the Dark Lord, he found it meaningless to dwell on it at that moment. His wand trembled in his hand, and as its tip traced a path through the misty air, a powerful force suddenly erupted. Vidia Cleona, who was on the verge of being engulfed by the black waves, was abruptly accelerated and pulled away just as the waves closed in. The sound of the rolling black waves was like a violent roar, and a pair of scarlet eyes appeared intermittently. In the next instant, a green light, filled with a surging aura of death, broke through the waves, heading straight for Atticus's face. Avada Kedavra! The deep malevolence and potent magic behind the curse gave it unimaginable power. The green light streaked through the air, ionizing it and creating a colorful halo. In a daze, Atticus seemed to see a wave of white bones rushing toward him. A thunderous and majestic snort echoed through the night sky as Atticus's wand pierced the air, conjuring a massive platinum metal shield. The moment the cursed light collided with the shield, every wizard watching the battle in the forest turned pale. In their spiritual world, a dull roar reverberated, disrupting the magic within their bodies. Many elderly and frail wizards even rolled their eyes and fainted. Both the shield and the cursed light melted away, and a tyrannical airwave swept across the area, scattering the roaring black waves. Atticus took only a single step back. Once he regained his balance, he extended his left hand toward Vidia Cleona. With a swift motion, the wand passed down through generations of druids transformed into an afterimage, reaching Vidia, who, though conscious, had lost the ability to resist. As she was drawn closer, she looked at Atticus's stern face, her expression a mix of despair and relief. Atticus Blaine. If this foolish woman were captured here, all future plans would be ruined. Such an opportunity might not come again for years, and she knew his crucial secrets. At this critical moment, Voldemort intervened, dispersing the black waves in the sky. What appeared before Atticus was a man the size of a house elf, with an ugly, twisted face marred by repulsive scars. Voldemort, resembling a grotesque figure, glared at Atticus with intense hatred, then charged at him with a reckless determination, as if intent on mutual destruction. This resolve made Atticus frown. He withdrew his wand and raised it high, transforming it into a 100-foot-long golden flame sword. In the blink of an eye, the giant sword descended with a mighty slash. Boom! The loudest roar of the night erupted, and the explosive airwaves from the dark magic surged skyward, scattering the dense clouds. Sensing something amiss, Atticus withdrew the giant metal shield he had summoned once more, waved his wand, and dispersed the smoke in the sky. Vidia Cleona's figure was vanishing into a twisted vortex, and Voldemort's deformed torso had dissolved into nothingness. A formless shadow, more elusive than a ghost, stood before the swirling vortex. Atticus Blaine, I remember your name. We will meet again. The voice echoed like a roar from the depths of hell. As the whirlpool gradually subsided, the shadow fixed its gaze on Atticus before vanishing into the endless night with a speed that defied comprehension. Atticus slowly lowered his wand, his eyes drifting to the oddly shaped cane in his left hand. After a moment, he exhaled a long, weary breath. "Indeed," he murmured, his gaze lingering on the now tranquil night. "We'll see you soon, Mr. Riddle." End of this chapter. Chapter 478. Harry's breathing gradually steadied, and with Sirius's help, he slowly stood up. His fingertips brushed against his scar, and the excruciating pain he had felt moments ago vanished as the ominous black wave in the sky dissipated. It was as if the entire ordeal had been nothing more than a dream. In the quiet, dark forest, the gentle hum of bees began to fill the air once more. The foreign wizards who had gathered to watch the World Cup stared in horror at the remnants of the Quidditch field, now reduced to just a third of its original size. Their faces were a mix of fear and curiosity. That last one was, your scar, Harry. Ron's face was pale, and he stammered, trying to voice his thoughts. However, a cautionary glance from Sirius silenced him. Boom! With a sharp explosion, Atticus Blaine appeared, landing gracefully in front of Sirius. He surveyed the group: Sirius, Mr. Weasley, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Ginny, Fred, and George. When his gaze fell upon Bill and Charlie, Atticus raised an eyebrow, offering a slight smile to the two unfamiliar faces. Finally, his eyes settled on Victor Krum, who stood beside Hermione. "Who are you?" Atticus inquired calmly. Despite the mild tone, Krum's dark complexion turned as pale as snow. He trembled, nearly collapsing from the weakness in his legs. "Victor Krum, sir. I'm the Bulgarian Seeker. I study at Durmstrang." Krum stammered in broken English. "In the box earlier, we were cornered by 3 dark wizards in black cloaks. It was this young man who came to our aid with Arthur," Sirius added. "Are you a student of Karkaroff?" Atticus asked. "Yes, sir, you are correct," Krum replied, his body tense as if under the gaze of a dragon. Atticus nodded slightly, shifting his attention away from the nervous young man. He scanned the group. Apart from Sirius, who appeared injured, and Harry, who looked unusually pale, everyone else seemed to be in relatively good condition. "Where's the dark wizard I trapped?" Atticus asked. "Taken by Fudge. He escaped the box with us, and then took the attacker to find Rufus. I think he intends to interrogate her," Sirius explained. Atticus nodded thoughtfully. The wizard he had captured hailed from the underground world. According to their traditions, to prevent mission details from being exposed, they often employed methods to safeguard information. He doubted the Ministry's interrogation would yield any useful results. After a moment of contemplation, Atticus noticed the awe in everyone's eyes. They seemed unsure of how to address him. Meanwhile, the surrounding crowd gradually realized Atticus Blaine was present. They cautiously approached, stopping at a respectful distance. A young boy, camera in hand, aimed it at Atticus, but before he could take a picture, his father snatched the camera away in fear and hurriedly pulled the child into the crowd. Among the wizards, anyone who met Atticus's gaze quickly looked away, avoiding eye contact. Observing this, Atticus remained expressionless, though he sighed inwardly. It was no wonder Dumbledore spent most of his time at Hogwarts, rarely leaving his office unless necessary. People revered Albus Dumbledore, but in a way, he was confined to Hogwarts by those who feared his power. After tonight, many things would change, yet what was heartening was that some eyes remained unchanged. Sirius, eager for answers, asked, "What's going on, Atticus? Why did you suddenly appear here? And what happened with that woman and the Black Shadow just now?" When Harry mentioned the powerful witch and the Dark Shadow, he seemed eager to speak further, but Atticus Blaine raised his hand to stop him. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and he said calmly, "This isn't the right place for a conversation. Let's find somewhere more suitable." "Let's head to our tent, just outside the woods," Sirius suggested with a nod. "I need to find someone from the Ministry, Sirius," Mr. Weasley interjected, his curiosity piqued by the impending discussion. Despite his interest, he hesitated, knowing his response, abilities awaited. For the Ministry of Magic, tonight's chaos was only beginning. Rescue operations, investigations, compensation, and damage control would keep them occupied well into the holiday season. "Let's go. I suspect it won't be long before the Ministry of Magic comes looking for me," Atticus said, stepping forward. As he moved, the crowd parted instinctively, people stepping aside with a mix of awe and apprehension, yet no one dared to approach him. "Thank you for earlier, Krum." Hermione called out gratefully to Crumb before hurrying to catch up with the group. Crumb stood there, feeling a sense of loss, watching them leave in silence. The campground resembled a scene from an apocalypse. Although the commotion near the stadium had subsided, safety was far from assured. Everywhere, people were frantically packing and fleeing. Ministry of Magic staff were scattered throughout, attempting to maintain order, but their efforts seemed futile. One unfortunate individual, in a panic, botched his apparition spell, resulting in a gruesome split, his leg landing dozens of feet from his torso. He lay on the ground, wailing in agony, until a ministry employee rushed over to assist him. Witnessing this, Sirius and the others wore grave expressions. No one knew the full extent of the injuries or the number of lives lost in the night's turmoil. The group filed into the tent, and Sirius led them to the back garden. It wasn't until Atticus sat down that everyone else followed suit. The atmosphere was somber. Despite having witnessed a duel that would be remembered in history, no one felt any joy. With a thud, Atticus placed his grapevine wand on the table before him. The uniquely shaped wand drew awe-struck gazes from everyone. Although Atticus had defeated the mysterious witch that night, the oppressive aura she had exuded lingered in their minds. "Where's Remus? Wasn't he with you?" Atticus asked, rubbing his temples warily. Suppressing Vidia Cleona in direct confrontation had taken all his strength. Before Arthur arrived to support us, he saw Remus take down a cloaked wizard. Remus was seriously injured, and Arthur had his colleagues take him to St. Mungo's, Sirius explained. The thought of Remus, recently discharged, being hospitalized again, cast a shadow over Sirius's eyes. Atticus nodded, lowering his hand from his brow. He noticed Harry looking at him eagerly and offered a nod and a smile. "Is there something you want to ask me, Harry?" "Professor Blaine," Harry exclaimed, breaking the tense silence. He bumped his chair with a clang as he stood, placing both hands on the table. "Who is the witch who tried to take me? Do you know her?" This was the question on everyone's mind. From the exchange between Professor Blaine and the witch during their confrontation, it was clear they were acquainted. "This question is more complicated," Atticus replied with a self-deprecating smile. "Knowing her identity doesn't mean much. All I can tell you is that I have a problem with her. I've been tracking her whereabouts, and I didn't expect her to show up here today." "I saw her in my dream, Professor," Harry exclaimed, his voice tinged with urgency. That witch was with Voldemort. The mention of Voldemort's name sent a collective gasp through the garden. The Weasley children, except for Sirius, Hermione, and Ron, were visibly shocked by Harry's bold pronouncement. "A dream?" Atticus Blaine frowned thoughtfully. "Do you remember the letter Harry wrote to me before, Atticus, when we had just returned from our adventure?" Sirius interjected, his expression grave as he tried to explain the situation to Atticus in the simplest terms possible. He then fixed his gaze intently on Harry. "Are you sure you didn't mistake her identity, Harry?" "I swear," Harry insisted, his voice filled with conviction. "The witch and Voldemort were in an old house, plotting something sinister. It seemed like they were planning to capture me." It wasn't until tonight that Harry recalled more details from his dream. Hermione covered her mouth, her eyes wide with concern, while Ron and his siblings looked bewildered. Professor Blaine's calm demeanor helped to ease some of the tension in the air. After taking a deep breath, he said, "There was an old man in that house. He seemed to be a muggle, and I believe Voldemort killed him. Oh, and Bertha Jorkins. Voldemort seems to have killed her too." End of this chapter. Chapter 479. Sleepless Night. "Bertha Jorkins," exclaimed Sirius, Hermione, and Ron in unison. Earlier that morning, while climbing Stoat Mountain, Mr. Weasley had mentioned that she once worked for Barty Crouch and was now under Ludo Bagman's supervision. She had left for a vacation in Albania a month ago and hadn't been heard from since. Harry's affirmative nod made Sirius abandon his intention to question further. Instead, he turned to Atticus Blaine, hoping for an explanation. However, he quickly realized that Atticus couldn't possibly know everything. How could he know about Bertha Jorkins' encounter with Voldemort and her subsequent demise? In truth, Atticus did know. "You saw the conversation between Voldemort and Cleona in your dream," he said, lowering his head and gently rubbing his temples. After a brief moment of contemplation, a theory formed in his mind. Harry was a Horcrux. inadvertently created by Voldemort. His body contained fragments of Voldemort's soul, and Harry might be the only living person among all of Voldemort's Horcruxes. This mysterious magical connection allowed Harry to glimpse into Voldemort's thoughts. Having reached this conclusion, Atticus stopped rubbing his temples and looked calmly into Harry's eyes. After confirming that the light in Harry's green eyes remained pure, he withdrew his gaze. Since Atticus was unwilling to divulge how he met the mysterious witch or the reasons behind it, and no one could compel him to do so, Sirius hesitated before asking another question on their behalf. "The dark shadow that appeared at the end, Atticus," Sirius said in a serious tone, "is it Voldemort?" The group hadn't seen Voldemort's true form that night. All they had witnessed was a dark shadow and an ugly creature. Except for Sirius and Harry, who knew some details, the others wouldn't have guessed the connection to the infamous Lord Voldemort. "Why do you think so?" Atticus raised an eyebrow and looked at Sirius with a smile. "Isn't it obvious?" Sirius replied calmly. "Harry dreamed that this witch was collaborating with Voldemort. She appeared here tonight just to kidnap Harry. If it weren't for Voldemort's orders, I can't fathom how Harry could provoke such a powerful witch." Sirius's tone was filled with concern. The Dark Lord has always been adept at deceiving people. Over a decade ago, he used this skill to gather a large following. Now it seems he's found himself a powerful ally. Atticus smiled, unfazed. "Even if it is Voldemort, it doesn't matter. If we have Dumbledore, he will find a way." "Yes, Dumbledore is indeed the wizard Voldemort fears most, but you are equally important, Atticus. Without you, I'm afraid Dumbledore wouldn't be able to handle two powerful dark wizards simultaneously," Sirius said sincerely, prompting several young wizards to nod in agreement. "Thank you for your trust, Sirius," Atticus replied with a gentle smile. "However, dealing with a Dark Lord like Voldemort requires the concerted efforts of many, not just one or two individuals." "Wise words, Atticus," an old voice suddenly interjected. Atticus looked up to see a silver phoenix Patronus with blue eyes gliding through the enchanted ceiling, coming to rest on the dining table before them. "Professor Dumbledore!" Harry exclaimed in disbelief, his voice filled with surprise. "Good evening, Harry," the silver phoenix nodded to him. "I'm relieved to see everyone here is safe and sound." "So you already know what happened here, Headmaster Dumbledore?" Atticus asked, his gaze fixed on the shadow of Dumbledore within the Patronus. "Yes," Dumbledore's voice was solemn. "I was enjoying the new products from Honeydukes in my office when Connolly sent someone to Hogwarts." Atticus Blaine was urgently summoned to the Ministry of Magic. Connolly had explained everything to him in his office, and Atticus had also received updates from various other sources. "If you don't mind, Atticus, I hope you can come to the Ministry of Magic immediately. This is also Connolly's invitation. After witnessing your ability to handle tonight's crisis, he probably won't dare to face you alone," someone had remarked. Atticus nodded, stood up from his seat, and after securing Vidia's cane, he turned to Sirius. "It's getting late. Stay here at the camp for now. Tomorrow morning, take these children back to St. Catchpole Village." Sirius nodded slightly, watching Atticus stride out to tackle the night's troubles. There was a hint of envy and loss in Sirius's eyes. "Wait, Atticus!" Sirius called out suddenly. Atticus paused and turned back. "Once you've resolved everything, if you have time, I'd like to have a private chat with you." Atticus raised an eyebrow, and Harry looked at his godfather in surprise. "I understand," Atticus nodded, then turned and left again. "Good night, everyone." The silver phoenix blinked at Harry and the others. Though it was just a bird, Harry felt as if Professor Dumbledore was smiling kindly at them. "See you again when school starts," the Phoenix Patronus said before dispersing with a pop, transforming into a dreamy sky filled with stars, enveloping the group in a sense of loss. As Atticus exited the tent, the chaos outside had not subsided. It had only intensified. Wizards from around the world were rushing back from the woods, many packing their belongings to leave overnight. Others were angrily confronting Ministry of Magic employees, demanding explanations for the night's events. In the distance, the faint sounds of Muggle fire trucks and police cars could be heard. The earlier battle involving Atticus, Vitya, and Voldemort had been so loud that it couldn't be completely concealed from the Muggles. The Muggle authorities had been alerted, and were investigating, which would undoubtedly increase the Ministry of Magic's workload. Mr. Weasley likely wouldn't get much sleep this month. Further away, Rita Skeeter appeared, her ever-present handbag in tow. She seemed invigorated, questioning everyone she encountered, whether tourists or ministry employees. As a current affairs reporter, she specialized in political events and prominent figures, not sports. However, tonight she had stumbled upon a major story. The chaotic scene made Atticus sigh. He couldn't assist with the aftermath. It was up to the Ministry of Magic to manage the public's anger. Composing himself, Atticus stepped forward, slipping into a gap in space. After a moment of spinning, he found himself in the Grand Hall of the Ministry of Magic. End of this chapter. Chapter 480, Fudge's Attitude. The Grand Hall of the Ministry of Magic, once bustling with wizards attending to various matters even on ordinary days, now stood eerily empty. It was late at night, and an unexpected incident had drawn everyone away. Guards and emergency personnel had been dispatched to the Quidditch field to calm the frightened crowd. In the midst of this chaos, Dumbledore stood by the fountain of the Magic Brothers, counting the gleaming silver sickles and copper nuts at the bottom of the pool with great interest. Before Atticus Blaine's true form arrived, Dumbledore had already sensed his presence and took the lead. He turned to the slightly rippling air with a knowing smile. "You're quick, Atticus. I thought you might take a moment to change before coming," he remarked as Atticus materialized from the air. "Thanks for the reminder, Headmaster." "I hadn't noticed," Atticus replied, glancing down at his attire. With a snap of his fingers, his dusty robe transformed into a pristine garment. He surveyed the empty hall, frowning slightly as he approached Dumbledore. Such a significant event has occurred, yet the Ministry of Magic's personnel are at the Quidditch field, trying to appease the public. Meanwhile, Minister Fudge has retreated to his office. What could he possibly be thinking? Sometimes, Connolly's actions and views do indeed spark controversy and confusion, Dumbledore said calmly, his blue eyes fixed on Atticus. He seemed unsurprised by Fudge's foolish behavior. For instance, before I left his office, he asked if there was any way to keep you at Hogwarts. Atticus chuckled, straightening his disheveled hair in the reflection of the fountain. Is he worried I'll seize this opportunity to demand his resignation? At least he didn't ask if I could send you to Azkaban, Dumbledore replied, his silver beard quivering, though his eyes held little amusement. The abilities you displayed tonight have surpassed what Connolly can tolerate. If you expressed a desire to become Minister of Magic, many would support you, and Connolly wouldn't be able to stop it, especially since the Ministry will undoubtedly be blamed for tonight's disaster. It's understandable why Connolly would make such a humorous request. However, Atticus, I believe you realize that Connolly may not be as cordial with you in the future. Facing Dumbledore's penetrating gaze, Atticus pursed his lips. You can tell our dear minister that if he convinces the school board to double my salary, I might be content to remain at Hogwarts indefinitely. In that case, I'm sure Connolly will find a way to fulfill your wish, Atticus, Dumbledore replied, his smile becoming more genuine. Atticus was aware that it wasn't just Cornelius Fudge who feared his ambitions. Albus Dumbledore, standing before him, was even more concerned. Beside the fountain, both Dumbledore and Atticus fell into a brief silence. They gazed at the clear water, the pure gold sculptures of wizards and witches atop the fountain, and the centaurs, goblins, and house elves surrounding them, all looking on with admiration. After a long pause, Atticus whispered, "Is there anything you need me to answer, Headmaster? Without delving into my secrets, I'm willing to do my best to answer your questions." Dumbledore's old face relaxed slightly at Atticus's words, the light in his eyes flickering softly. "I want to express my gratitude to you, Atticus. If you hadn't appeared in time, it's unimaginable how many lives would have been lost tonight." Atticus Blaine shook his head slightly, acknowledging that Dumbledore was as astute as ever. "The witch I encountered tonight came to take Harry away," he began, locking eyes with Dumbledore. "Perhaps you've heard about Harry's dream over the summer, the one that caused his scar to react. The woman from his dream was her." "Tom has indeed found a formidable ally for himself," Dumbledore replied calmly. "I was quite surprised to learn of a wizard whose age and power rival yours, Atticus. So, you believe this young lady intended to abduct T. Harry during the World Cup? Was this Tom's directive? Probably not, Atticus replied, shaking his head. Voldemort was furious about Vitia Cleona's appearance at the Quidditch match tonight. He does want Harry, but his plan was certainly not to kidnap him publicly in front of 100,000 wizards. He had another scheme, and I suspect it wasn't approved by his followers. This reckless attack seems to be Vitia Cleona's own doing. Cleona, Dumbledore mused. The notion of Voldemort wanting Harry was no surprise to him. Both he and Atticus had anticipated it. However, the name of the witch caught his attention. If I heard correctly, that surname is quite distinctive. You're right, Headmaster. She hails from Druidism. It's a surname passed down through the leaders of that sect. Vitia Cleona is the current priestess of Druidism. This is indeed surprising, Dumbledore said, blinking thoughtfully. Though I've never interacted with them, I understood them to be a peace-loving group. I'm curious how Tom managed to persuade them to join his cause. That's what I'm trying to uncover, Atticus admitted, his eyes glinting with intrigue. There were still pieces of the puzzle he was investigating, and he saw no need to disclose everything he knew just yet. Noticing the appropriate confusion on Atticus's face, Dumbledore stroked his beard but decided not to press further. The two took the elevator to the underground floor, where Fudge's office was located. After the Greyback incident, Atticus had frequented the ministry, so he was familiar with the place. Upon opening the door, they found not only Fudge, but also Rufus Scrimgeour, the head of the Auror office, who was in the midst of reporting something to Fudge. Rufus abruptly stopped speaking when Atticus entered, his once lion-like sharp eyes now avoiding Atticus's gaze. Rufus harbored a dislike for Atticus, believing him to be less than a respectable wizard. At the press conference following Greyback's defeat, Atticus had introduced a new idea for Li Huo, which Rufus felt misled the public. "Ah, Atticus, you're here already," Fudge exclaimed. He had sustained some injuries earlier in the box, his arm hurt by the falling ceiling. Now his right hand was bandaged. Before Atticus and Dumbledore arrived, he had been listening to Rufus's report, which seemed to embarrass him, as evidenced by the reluctance on his round face. Upon seeing Atticus, Fudge instinctively stood to greet him, but awkwardly sat back down, fidgeting before offering Atticus a slightly embarrassed smile. Atticus noticed Fudge's awkwardness and smiled, maintaining a humble tone. "Headmaster Dumbledore mentioned you wanted to see me. I agree it's important to explain tonight's events to the wizarding world, so here I am. But it seems you're in the middle of something." "Do I need to avoid it?" Atticus Blaine inquired, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Oh no," Fudge quickly interjected, waving his hand dismissively. "You should stay. In fact, I could use your help with this matter. Well, Rufus, perhaps you could attend to your own tasks for now." End of this chapter.